Holy shit, imagine a scrawny-ass orphan kid gets Sinbad's dungeon powers and turns into a fucking god king who slaps Sonin, splits tailed beasts like cheap ramen, and builds an empire while his harem fights over who rides him next. Naruto didn't just win the ninja world, he fucking conquered it. Buckle up. This is the ultimate what-if that breaks everything.
The ground tore open at the eastern edge of the Land of Fire on a morning that should have been ordinary, and by sundown the world had a new wound in it. A column of gold pierced the sky where Wasteland Scrub had been the day before. A tower so tall it carved the clouds in half, and so bright it could be seen from the watchtowers of Konoha, 40 miles away. It did not hum. It did not roar. It simply was, the way mountains are, the way oceans are, the way certain things arrive in a world and dare it to disagree with them. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood on the roof of the Hokage Tower and watched the light from his pipe go cold between his fingers. He sent his best. He sent Anbu Black Ops, 2 squads of them, and then a third, and then a fourth, until he had emptied half the wolves from his kennels and pushed them toward the gleaming structure. 3 days passed, a week, a month. The masked operatives walked into the Gold Tower and the Gold Tower kept them. Not one returned. Not one body washed back to the surface. The Hokage stopped sending teams when the silence got loud enough that even he could hear it over the village. In a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a building the landlord had stopped repairing 6 years ago, a 10-year-old boy with sun-yellow hair sat cross-legged on his windowsill and stared east. He could see the column of light from his bedroom. Every child in Konoha could see it, but only one of them felt it pull. Naruto Uzumaki did not understand the pull. He understood very little about himself in those days. He understood that the villagers crossed the street when he walked toward them, and he understood that the academy instructors graded his work with a different pen than they used on the other students, and he understood that the old man at the Hokage Tower was the only person in the entire village who looked at him like a person. The rest of his understanding was a long blank wall he had been pressing his hand against since the day he learned to walk. The pull was the first thing in his life that felt like an answer. He left a note on his kitchen table for the old man. He packed 3 changes of clothes and a sleeve of stale ramen cups and the cheap academy kunai that his teacher had handed him with a sneer, instead of with the ceremony other boys had received. He climbed out his window at midnight, slipped past 2 patrols by hugging the gutters of the merchant district, and ran east through the woods until his lungs burned and his legs gave out, and the gold light was the only thing left in the sky. The dungeon's door opened for him. It had refused entry to 4 squads of elite assassins. It opened for a barefoot boy with bleeding heels and a kunai that had never killed anything. Inside, the world changed. There were corridors of jade and rivers of mercury. There were halls where the air sang and forests where the trees had been carved from a single piece of obsidian by something with patience and hands. There were monsters waiting in those halls with teeth like knives and eyes like dying suns. The boy lost a tooth to one of them in the first hour. He lost half the skin off his back to another by the end of the first day. He cried himself to sleep against the warm metal flank of a sleeping golem on the second night and woke up grimmer and harder and one step closer to whatever the tower wanted him to become. He met Baal in a chamber of blue stone at the top of 1,000 stairs. The Djinn of Wrath and Heroes regarded the boy with eyes that had watched empires fall and rise and fall again. He looked for the king his throne room demanded. He saw a small, half-starved Jinchuriki with his academy kunai clutched in both hands and tears drying on his cheeks. He almost laughed. Then the Rook entered the chamber. The flow of destiny is invisible to most beings, but Djinn see it the way fish see water. The Rook did not drift around Naruto. It clustered around him. It wreathed him. It pressed against his shoulders and his hair and the back of his neck like 1,000 small white birds insisting on a single nest. Baal had served 7 kings across the long centuries since the priests of Solomon had bound him, and not once had he watched the destiny of the world choose someone the way it was choosing this child. "Tell me your dream," Baal said, and his voice rang the chamber like a bell. "I want to be looked at," Naruto whispered. "That is small. I want to be looked at without fear. That is larger. I want the world to be a place where no child has to wait outside a dungeon for someone to love him." The Djinn went still. "That," said Baal, "is the answer of a king." Naruto Uzumaki walked out of the first dungeon 5 days later, carrying a sword instead of a kunai. The academy blade had been melted down by Baal's fire and reforged at the dungeon's heart into a scimitar of pale blue steel, its hilt set with a single sapphire that pulsed with the patient heartbeat of a djinn. He stepped out into the wasteland, and the gold tower folded itself down behind him and slid back into the earth and was gone. The boy stood alone in a field of glassed sand with a sword on his hip and a fortune of gold and gems spilling out around his feet. And he did not return to Konoha. He walked east instead. 2 years are a long time when you are 10 and the world has cracked open in front of you. Naruto crossed the land of tea on foot and stowed away on a fishing junk to reach the southern continents. He survived a sandstorm in a desert so vast it had its own weather. He fought slavers in a city where the sun never set and freed 80 children from a hole beneath a brothel and walked them to safety past a guard captain whose ribs he had taken out with a sweep of the new sword. He climbed the second dungeon at the age of 10 and a half and walked out with a djinn bound to a silver coin he wore around his neck on a leather thong. He climbed the third before his 11th birthday. He earned the fourth in winter and the fifth in spring and the sixth on a green island where the locals worshipped a volcano, and the volcano had a djinn at the bottom of it who wanted a worthier vessel than the priests had been providing. By the time he stood at the gate of the 7th dungeon at 11 3/4, he had killed 2 missing 9 from the land of lightning who tried to ambush him in their sleep and walked an entire mountain band of warlords off a cliff with a single sentence. He had spent a year learning Magoe negation from the Yambala gladiators, a tribe of warrior monks who lived in red canyons and trained their children to fight by suspending them upside down over scorpion pits. He had grown tall. He had grown broad. He had grown into a face that the women in the market stared at, and the men in the taverns watched the way men watch a fire that has gotten close to the dry grass. He returned to Konoha on a clear morning in late spring, 3 months before his 12th birthday, with 7 pieces of gold jewelry on his body and a scimitar at his hip and an aura around him that the gate guards felt before they saw him. The chunin on duty rose halfway out of his chair, opened his mouth to demand identification, and then sat back down without speaking because the boy walking through the gate looked at him once and the look said, "You may sit down," and the chunin's body obeyed before his mind had a chance to disagree. Hiruzen Sarutobi met him in the office that had been waiting for him for 2 years. The old man stood when the door opened. He saw the boy. He saw the 7 pieces of jewelry, and he saw the sword, and he saw the way the boy's robes fell around him in folds that had clearly been tailored by hands that did this for kings. He saw the eyes, which had not been those eyes when this boy had left. "Welcome home, Naruto-kun," said the Hokage. "Old man," said Naruto, and crossed the office and pulled the 70-year-old shinobi into an embrace that was warm enough to make Hiruzen feel 10 years younger and steady enough to make him feel 1,000 years older at the same time. "I missed you. I'm sorry I made you worry. I had to go where I was being called." "And what did the calling tell you when you got there?" Naruto stepped back and smiled, and the office got a shade brighter. "That I'm going to be a king," he said, "and that I'd like Konoha to be my first ally." Hiruzen looked at him for a long moment. Then he sat down in his chair, took a slow pull from his pipe, and laughed until his eyes ran. He laughed because he was relieved, and because he was terrified, and because he could see in the boy's face that he had not been joking, and because somewhere underneath all of it, he knew that the world that had broken Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki was about to meet their son and would have to answer for what it had done. He let Naruto re-enroll in the academy for the final week before graduation. The boy had asked for the ceremony, not the credential, and the old man understood why. Closure mattered. Stories needed their bookends. The shinobi who would one day reshape the continent wanted to walk through the door of the classroom that had told him he would amount to nothing, and he wanted to do it in his own time and on his own terms. He did it on a Wednesday. Iruka Umino was halfway through a lecture on chakra control theory when the classroom door slid open. He looked up to scold the latecomer. The words died in his mouth. A young man stood in the doorway. He was taller than every student in the room and most of the teachers, and his shoulders filled the frame in a way that was almost too much for the architecture. He wore robes of indigo silk that fell open at the chest to show a sun-tanned collarbone and a silver chain. His hair was longer than it had been 2 years ago, sun-bright, pulled back loosely. There was a scimitar at his hip in a worked leather scabbard. There were rings on his fingers and bracelets at both wrists, and a necklace of gold and a necklace of silver and an earring of pale gold that caught the morning light and threw it back across the room in a slow, warm gleam. He smiled. It was the smile of a person who had been told he was nothing by this exact room and who had returned not to argue with the verdict, but to demonstrate with charm and warmth and no anger at all that the verdict had been a clerical error. Ino Yamanaka was sitting at her desk near the back when she saw him. She had been mid-whisper about Sasuke Uchiha to Sakura Haruno. Her pencil was in her hand. Her mouth was open. She made eye contact with the boy in the doorway, and the boy in the doorway smiled at her. And Ino Yamanaka's brain performed a polite shutdown sequence, and her body sat down on the floor with surprising elegance, and her pencil rolled away under the desks of 3 different girls who watched it go without saying a word. Sakura Haruno's jaw came unhinged. She had been ranked first in book learning in their year for as long as either of them could remember, and her mind processed information at a rate she was rightly proud of. And right now her mind was processing exactly one piece of information at maximum throughput, and that piece of information was him. Sasuke Uchiha was sitting at the front. He turned his head only slightly. He was a prodigy who had been told he was a prodigy by people whose opinions he respected, and he had learned to look at threats and rivals with a flatness that was its own kind of weapon. He looked at the boy in the doorway with that flatness now. The flatness did not survive the eye contact. Something behind Sasuke's ribs went very, very still. He sat up straighter and his right hand drifted without his permission toward the kunai pouch at his thigh. Iruka swallowed. Naruto? Sensei? Naruto inclined his head. The motion was small and warm. I missed your lectures. I'm sorry I was away. May I sit in for the rest of the week? Iruka opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and finally just gestured at the room. Naruto did not go to a seat. He walked between the desks toward the window, and the conversation in the room died as he passed each row, the way a wave silences chatter as it rolls down a beach. He stopped at the 3rd desk in the 2nd row from the windows, and he looked down at a girl with short dark hair and pale eyes, and a face that had gone the color of poured milk the moment she felt him approach. Hinata Hyuga had been training her courage for 2 years. She had been writing down things she would say to him on the day he came back. She had a small pink notebook of those things, hidden beneath her pillow, that her sister had only recently stopped teasing her about. The notebook was in her room. The room was in the Hyuga compound. Hinata was in the academy, and he was here. Hinata. His voice was warm. He pronounced her name like it belonged to him, and he was returning it to her as a gift. She tried to stand. Her knees disagreed. She tried to bow. Her body refused. She managed, with the kind of effort that wins wars, to lift her face. He was looking down at her with the most patient kindness she had ever seen on another human being. He held out his hand. She put hers in his without remembering deciding to. He raised her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. "You've grown even more beautiful while I was gone," he said. "Forgive me for staying away so long." Hinata's eyes rolled back. She fainted from her chair into the air. He caught her with one arm before she could touch the floor and lowered her onto her desk like she was made of porcelain. And he tucked her hair gently away from her face, and he straightened, and he turned to face the rest of the class. The classroom looked at him. He smiled at all of them at once, and Sakura forgot how to breathe for a full second, and Ino, who had managed to climb back into her chair, slid sideways back out of it again with a soft thud, and even Shino Aburame, who had been called the most expressionless boy in the village since he was 4, tilted his sunglasses down half an inch to confirm with his own eyes that what was happening in this room was happening. Naruto found a seat by the window and folded his long legs under the desk in a fold that suggested the desk was the one being inconvenienced. He set his chin on his palm and looked out at the sky as Iruka tried with admirable courage to resume the lecture. Iruka made it about 90 seconds before he gave up and let the room talk. 3 days later, the team assignments went up. Kakashi Hatake stood in the staff lounge of the Hokage Tower with the personnel file of Team 7 in his hands. He had been told in a brief and grim conversation with the Hokage that morning that one of his 3 students was something he would need to recalibrate his expectations around. The Hokage had used the word recalibrate. Kakashi had nodded politely and tried not to read too much into it. He read the files at the lounge counter. Sasuke Uchiha, clan prodigy, top of the class in combat, emotional issues stemming from the massacre, the usual. Sakura Haruno, top of the class academically, civilian background, chakra control above her year. Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, disappeared from the village at age 10, returned at age 12, status currently classified, see attached. Kakashi flipped to the attached. The attached was a single sheet of paper. It contained one line. The line read, "This boy has conquered 7 dungeons. The Hokage himself does not know the upper limit of his abilities. Approach with the respect you would show an S-rank ally. Approach with the caution you would show an S-rank unknown. Above all, do not provoke him without cause." Kakashi read the line twice. He folded the paper. He put it in his vest pocket. He went home and slept for 4 hours, which was more than he usually got, and woke up at dawn with the file still on his mind. The bell test was at the 3rd training ground at 6 in the morning. Kakashi arrived an hour late. This was his standard practice. It saved time on the introductory speech because the Genin were always frustrated by the time he showed up, and frustrated Genin made for honest first impressions. He arrived to find Sakura sitting cross-legged on the grass reading a scroll, Sasuke leaning against a tree with his arms crossed and his eyes closed, and Naruto sitting on a flat rock in the center of the clearing with one knee drawn up and his other leg dangling, sipping from a small ceramic cup of something that smelled like tea. There was a tea set on the rock next to him, a proper one, with a pot. "Sensei," said Naruto without opening his eyes, "would you like a cup? It's a smoked green from the southern coast. The merchant who sold it to me said it tasted like a thunderstorm with sugar in it. I think he was being poetic, but he wasn't wrong." Kakashi blinked his one visible eye. "Hello, team," he said. "I'm your Jonin sensei. Today we're going to do a test." "The bell test, yes." Naruto opened his eyes and smiled at him. The smile was warm and a little sorry, not the way a man smiles at someone he is about to disappoint very mildly. "Sasuke and Sakura have been told. I'll get the bells. They can each have one. You're going to pass us. I'd still very much like to share this tea with you when we're done, though. I think you'll enjoy it." Sakura looked up from her scroll. "Naruto, you can't just—" "I can, actually." Naruto stretched, set his cup down with a small click, and stood. "Sensei, I'll go first. If you object to the order of operations, please correct me." Kakashi considered, for the first time in many years, the possibility that he was the one being tested. "Why don't you come at me?" he said, "and we'll see what happens." Naruto inclined his head. He stepped down from the rock and walked across the clearing toward Kakashi at the unhurried pace of a man crossing his own garden. He did not draw his sword. He did not raise his hands. He stopped 3 meters away. Kakashi's 2 bells hung from his belt on a length of red cord. They jingled when he shifted his weight. "Sensei," said Naruto, and lifted his right hand and touched the gold necklace at his throat with 2 fingers. "Valifor." The word was warm and conversational. It might have been a greeting to an old friend. Kakashi launched himself forward. In the space between his back foot leaving the ground and his front foot landing on it, something happened to the air. Kakashi could feel it. The world had gotten thicker. His shuriken pouch felt like it had been filled with lead. His vest felt like it had been soaked in mud. The Sharingan beneath his Hitaiate spun open behind the cloth, processing the chakra in the clearing at full speed, and the Sharingan found something it had never found before. Nothing. There was no chakra here. Kakashi's right fist, fully extended in a feint toward Naruto's jaw, made it about 1 inch from where it had started. It took the punch 15 seconds to travel that 1 inch. By the end of those 15 seconds, Kakashi's left foot had progressed perhaps a hand's width forward, and his weight shift had stalled, and his Sharingan had stopped trying to track the boy because the boy was not moving fast. The boy was simply moving while Kakashi was moving so slowly that he might as well have been a tree. Sakura made a small sound. Sasuke had opened his eyes and was on his feet, his Sharingan flickering active in his own sockets for the first time in his life, the family bloodline awakening in pure shock at what he was watching. Naruto walked. He walked around Kakashi, the way a man walks around a statue in a museum. He reached out and pinched the first bell between his thumb and forefinger and unhooked it from the cord with the patience of someone untying a child's shoelace. He tossed the bell underhand across the clearing without looking. Sakura caught it without remembering deciding to. He unhooked the second bell. He tossed it underhand to Sasuke, who caught it with the Sharingan locked open and his hand visibly trembling. Naruto came back around to Kakashi's front. He leaned in. His robe brushed the Jonin-stilled vest. He brought his mouth close to Kakashi's ear, and his voice was warm and low and almost affectionate. Do you believe people are born to fulfill a certain destiny? The molecular stasis released. Kakashi's punch completed itself in a heartbeat. His fist closed on air where the boy's face had been. His weight crashed forward and he caught himself on his front foot in a near stumble, which was the most graceless thing he had done in front of his own students in 20 years. He straightened. He looked at the boy who was now standing 3 meters away from him again, smiling, hands clasped behind his back like a court attendant. "You pass," said Kakashi, and his voice did not shake, which was a small private victory he intended to remember later in the shower. "All 3 of you, come have tea." Sakura was staring at Naruto. The pencil and Ino part of her had collapsed somewhere in the last 60 seconds, and what had replaced it was the part of her that had always been the smartest person in the room and was now in the presence of someone who was a different kind of smart entirely. She did not yet love him. She was somewhere else. She was the recruit who has just seen her drill sergeant lose a sparring match to the new transfer, and she was reassembling her entire model of the world around the new fact. Sasuke's hands were still trembling. He stared at Naruto with his newly awakened Sharingan, and he saw, with the eyes that read combat the way other eyes read paper, what the rest of the world could not. He saw a young man whose chakra reserves were vast beyond reason. He saw 7 other things layered on top of that chakra that the Sharingan had no name for and could not parse. He saw a calm in the boy's posture that had been earned, not faked. He saw, in short, the wall he had been climbing his whole short life, and he understood that the wall was a single rung on a ladder he had only just been shown. His mouth pressed into a line. The fury that lived in him relocated. It had a new home now. It would build him. Kakashi sat down on the rock and accepted a cup of tea from Naruto's hand with the gravity of a man accepting a sword at his own surrender. He took a sip. He tasted thunder. The merchant had indeed been poetic, but he had also been telling the truth. "So," said Kakashi. "Yes, Sensei," said Naruto. "You are going to be a problem. Only for the right people, Sensei." Naruto poured a second cup and held it out to Sakura, who took it because her hand reached out before her brain could veto the motion. "I'd like Team 7 to be very good. I'd like Sasuke to grow into the strongest Uchiha there has ever been, and I'd like Sakura to become the kind of medic who terrifies the people who hire her. I think between the 4 of us, we can manage that. I will accept your guidance gratefully. May I ask one favor in return? Try me. When I tell you I'm leaving for a week, please tell the Hokage's office that Team 7 is on an extended training mission, and please ask them to leave my apartment door alone." Kakashi considered this. He sipped his tea. "You have my word." "Thank you, Sensei." Naruto's smile was warmer than the sun on the grass. "I think we're going to enjoy each other very much." A month passed. Team 7 ran D ranks like every other Genin team. They walked dogs and weeded gardens and helped repaint the post office, and Naruto did all of it with the warm grace of a man helping his neighbors, and the women of Konoha lined up to request Team 7 for chores that did not strictly need 3 Genin and a Jonin. Naruto helped a baker carry flour. He helped a widow rehang her shutters. He spent an afternoon teaching the postmaster's 9-year-old daughter how to brush her dog without making it cry. By the end of the 3rd week, the village had a new opinion about the Uzumaki boy, and the new opinion was being whispered in the markets in tones the old opinion would have found offensive. Then the bridge builder came. His name was Tazuna, and he was old and drunk and frightened, and he asked for a C-rank escort to his country, and the Hokage assigned Team 7. Kakashi accepted the mission with a feeling in his stomach that did not match the rank on the paperwork. He had learned in the month with this team to pay attention to that feeling. Naruto looked at Tazuna at the gate and saw him for what he was. He did not call him out. He did not refuse the mission. He looked at Tazuna with the warm, knowing patience of a doctor who has decided to let the patient finish his lie before treating him for the disease. The patient came in pretending he did not have. They left the village at dawn. They walked east for 2 days. The ambush was on the 3rd morning, in a clearing where the road curved around a stand of beech trees. 2 missing nin from Kirigakure, the demon brothers, dropped from the canopy with chained gauntlets and the specific intent of dismembering whoever Tazuna had hired. Their plan was a good plan against ordinary Genin and against an ordinary Jonin distracted by his charges. Naruto did not draw his sword. He turned in place, took 2 steps to the left, and caught the chain of the first brother in his bare hand. He yanked. The brother came off his feet and into a tree at speed. The tree broke. The brother did not stand up. The second brother turned to flee. Naruto pointed a single finger at him, and the Magoi in the air around his finger condensed into a thread of bright blue lightning that crossed the clearing in a heartbeat and struck the man in the back of the neck and dropped him with a smell of singed cotton. Kakashi, who had been about to move, lowered his kunai. Tazuna fell down. "Sensei," said Naruto, and tied the 2 unconscious missing nin to the broken tree with their own chains while he spoke. "Tazuna-san has a story to tell you. I think you should hear it before we go any further. I have already decided to take the mission as it actually is, but you and Sakura and Sasuke deserve the choice." Sakura, who had drawn a kunai about 2 heartbeats too late to participate, lowered her hand. Sasuke, whose Sharingan had spun active automatically at the first sign of trouble, was staring at the smoking spot on the back of the second brother's neck and revising several private estimates in real time. Tazuna told them about Gado. He told them about the bridge. He told them why the men in the canopy had been there and what would be waiting for them on the road ahead, and why he had not had the money or the courage to be honest at the Hokage's desk. Naruto crouched beside the old drunk and put a hand on his shoulder. "You should have told us," he said. "I would have come anyway. So would Kakashi, I think. Sasuke too. Sakura is still deciding, but she is brave and she will choose well. We're going to your country. We're going to finish your bridge, and we're going to kill the man who made you cry in front of strangers." Tazuna wept. The team did not turn back. They reached the coast on the 4th day, and the mist closed around them on the morning of the 5th, and out of the mist stepped a man with bandages over his face and a sword the size of a barn door on his back. Zabuza Momochi looked at the clearing and counted the targets and recognized the orange jumpsuited future on the page in front of him, and the page in front of him refused to behave. He saw Kakashi and felt the killing intent of a fellow professional, which was familiar. He saw the pink girl and the dark-haired boy and felt the proper amount of contempt. He saw the tall blonde in the silk robes, and his bandages were suddenly soaked in his own sweat. Naruto stepped past Kakashi to the front of the formation. "Sensei," he said, "please cover Tazuna and the children. I'll handle this." Kakashi did not argue. He was learning. He pulled his 3 other charges into a defensive half-circle around the bridge builder and lifted his Itaita to expose his own Sharingan, and he watched. Zabuza laughed. It was a rough sound, mostly bravado. "You sending the brat at me, Hatake?" He's sending himself, actually, said Naruto. His scimitar was still in its scabbard. His hands were loose at his sides. A demon of the mist? I faced real demons. You are just a man with a heavy sword. Zabuza's killing intent doubled. The mist around them thickened. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 3 seconds. The trees lost color. He came in fast. Kubikiribocho swept down in a stroke that would have cut a horse in half lengthwise. Naruto drew his scimitar in a single fluid motion, met the cleaver in midair, and channeled the Magi in his blood through the sword. The sapphire in the hilt of the scimitar lit up. A halo of blue lightning crawled up the blade and met Zabuza's cleaver at the moment of contact, and the contact made a thunderclap that flattened the mist outward in a perfect ring for half a mile in every direction. The standing water on the road glowed. Zabuza, who had been mid-swing with both hands on his sword and his feet in a puddle, locked solid. Every muscle in his body cramped. His chakra system, which he had been holding open for a follow-up, slammed shut. He fell forward, slowly, with the slow grace of a tree that has just been notified of its own death, and Naruto stepped to the side and let him land in the road. A senbon clattered off Naruto's collarbone. A boy in a hunter nin mask flickered from the trees, faster than Sakura's eye could track, and skidded to a stop between Zabuza's body and the team. Haku held 2 more senbon in his left hand, and his right hand was on the hilt of a tanto, and his stance was the stance of a person who intended to die for the man on the ground if the world required it. Naruto raised one hand. "Easy," he said, and his voice was warm. "He's alive. The lightning won't kill him. Set those down and we can talk." Haku did not set them down. Naruto moved. He did not look like he was moving fast. The rook around him shifted, and the boy with the senbon found himself with his wrists caught in 2 large warm hands and his back against Naruto's chest before he had finished a single breath. The senbon clattered to the ground. The tanto stayed sheathed. "Easy," Naruto repeated, and his mouth was near the ear of the porcelain mask, and his voice was so gentle that even Sakura, 10 meters away, felt her heart slow down. "I see you. You are a tool that loves the hand that holds it. You are the most loyal thing in this clearing. You shouldn't be wasted on a contract killer running from the mist. Listen to me. Your master is going to wake up in 20 minutes with a headache and his pride hurt. I'd like to talk to both of you about your next employer." Haku, who had never been spoken to like this in his entire life, did not move. He could not have moved. Naruto released his wrists. He stepped back. He looked over his shoulder at Kakashi and inclined his head. "Sensei, please ask Sakura to come bind his wrists. He won't fight us now. We'll bring them both to Tazuna-san's house. We have a great deal to discuss." They brought Zabuza and Haku to the bridge builder's house and tied Zabuza to a chair and put a kettle on. Zabuza woke up 2 hours later and tried to break the chair on principle, and Naruto poured him a cup of tea and pushed the cup across the table and said, "Try the tea first, Zabuza-san. It's an island blend. The killing can wait for the morning if you still want it then." Zabuza tried the tea. The week in the Land of Waves moved fast. Naruto walked into Gato's main warehouse on the second day, alone, at noon, and walked out with 3 sealed scrolls full of accounting documents and a list of every politician and merchant Gato had ever bribed in the Land of Fire. He did not kill anyone in the warehouse. He spoke to the night watchman for an hour about the man's daughter and the cost of medicine, and the night watchman wept and gave him the keys and then quit his job and went home. Gato did not even know the scrolls had been taken until the 7th day, when he found them sitting on his desk on top of a single sheet of paper that read, in clean handwriting, "We will be at the bridge tomorrow. Bring whatever men you can afford, or run. Either is fine." Gato did not run. He had spent his life making fearful men brave through money, and he believed, with the certainty of a man who had never been told no in 2 decades, that money would solve this problem too. He hired every freelancer in the country. He emptied his vaults. He marched 200 mercenaries out to the bridge on the morning of the 8th day, and he stood at the back of them on a litter carried by 2 large men, and he watched the line of the bridge. The line of the bridge contained 4 people. Tazuna's workers had finished the structure the night before. The road was clean. Kakashi was at the south end with his arms crossed. Sasuke and Sakura were behind him with weapons drawn, and behind them stood Zabuza Momochi, with his great sword loose at his side, and Haku at his elbow with 3 senbon between the fingers of each hand. The 2 missing nin had not spoken about their change of side, except to nod at Naruto when he had asked them this morning if they were sure. They had been sure. Naruto stood alone at the north end of the bridge, between the mercenary army and his friends. He wore his robes and his jewelry and his sword at his hip. The wind off the sea moved his sleeves. He did not draw his sword. He looked at the line of men in front of him with an expression that was almost kind, almost rueful, the way a teacher looks at a class that has chosen to misbehave on a day when the teacher has the patience of a saint. The mercenaries laughed. There were 200 of them. There was one of him. Gato shouted from the back. 500 ryo per man for whoever takes the blonde's head. Triple if you take it off in one piece. The front line stepped forward. They had axes and broadswords, and one of them had a wakizashi he had clearly stolen from someone with better taste. Naruto raised his right hand, palm out, the way one might ask a friend to wait a moment. The sky above the bridge darkened in a span of 3 breaths. Clouds rolled in from the open sea where there had been clear blue a moment before, and they piled up over the bridge in a thunderhead, and the air pressure dropped, and the mercenaries' ears popped, and the standing seagulls took off in a sudden white cloud. "If you don't want to die," said Naruto, "don't step into my territory." He said it once. He meant it completely. The front line hesitated. One of them, a heavy-set man with a chipped axe, looked over his shoulder at Gato, and Gato shrieked at him to move, and the man turned back to face the bridge and stepped forward because the threat behind him was the only one he had been trained to fear. Naruto activated Ball. It was a partial Djinn Equip. Most of his body stayed his own. The blue dragon scales raced from the back of his right hand, up his arm and across his shoulder, and ringed his neck in an open collar of blue armor. A single horn pushed out of his right temple. His scimitar came out of its scabbard with a sound like a bell, and the blade was no longer pale blue steel. It was lightning condensed into shape, white at its core and blue at its edges, and humming with a frequency that made the bridge's iron supports sing in sympathy. He moved his sword in an arc parallel to the bridge. Bararak. The clouds above the bridge opened. A localized hurricane of blue electricity came down in a wide cone from the thunderhead and met the front line of the mercenary army. Every weapon they were carrying, every axe, every sword, every spear and dagger and stolen kunai, flashed white hot and vaporized in their hands. The leather straps of their armor charred. The metal buckles fused to their skin. The front line of 200 men went from a wall of steel to a screaming, weaponless mass of singed humans on their knees in the space of 1 second. The bridge surface beneath them blackened in a perfect cone the width of the front line. The wood did not catch fire. The lightning had been too clean for that. It had been the kind of strike a king uses to break an army's hand without destroying his own bridge. The back ranks broke. 200 men became 198 in the time it took them to turn around, and then it became 180, and then it became 40, and then the only people left on the bridge were the front line on their knees and Gato on his litter with the 2 large men under him already dropping the poles and running. Gato fell off the litter onto his back. He scrambled. He pulled a small Derringer-style pistol from his coat, a southern import, and pointed it at Naruto with a hand that shook. Naruto sheathed his scimitar. He let the Djinn Equip recede. He walked across the burned section of bridge at his usual pace, stepping around the kneeling, sobbing front line as if they were puddles. He stopped in front of Gato. He looked down at the small man with the small gun. "Put it down," he said. "You don't want to be remembered for this. Whoever you were when you started out, you can still die with a small piece of him." Gato pulled the trigger. The bullet stopped in the air a finger width from Naruto's chest. It hung there, suspended, the powder smoke curling around it. Naruto plucked it out of the air with 2 fingers. He turned it over. He looked at Gato with something that was almost pity. "Vepar," he said mostly to himself, and dropped the bullet on the bridge surface. The mercenaries on their knees realized, in the silence that followed, that the magnetism they had felt as a faint hum during the lightning strike had been doing something the whole time. And the something it had been doing was making every piece of metal on the bridge belong to the boy in the robes. 3 of them moved their hands and discovered that their belt buckles, which had been metal, were no longer attached to their belts. They wept openly. Naruto reached down and took the gun out of Gato's hand. He passed it back over his shoulder to Sasuke, who had crossed the bridge to stand at his elbow without being asked. Sasuke pocketed the gun. "Naruto," said Sasuke, and his voice was lower than it had been a month ago. "You don't have to be the one to do this." "I know." Naruto looked back at Gato. "I want this country to remember that the man who broke it died at the hand of someone who was passing through. They need that more than they need to do it themselves. Do you understand?" Sasuke considered. "I think so." "Good." Naruto crouched in front of Gato. He spoke softly. "You took bread out of the mouths of children, Gato-san. You're not going to do it again." He did it with his bare hand. It was quick. The mercenaries who watched would tell the story badly for the rest of their lives. The bridge was finished and named within the week. Tazuna wanted to call it the Great Naruto Bridge, and Naruto laughed and said no, with a warmth that made the old man laugh too, and they compromised on the Bridge of the Free Country, which the locals shortened to the Free Bridge inside of a year. Naruto opened one of his sealed dungeon treasure scrolls and gave Tazuna enough gold to rebuild 3 towns and pay the fishermen for their losses. And then he sat down with Zabuza and Haku in Tazuna's kitchen and made them an offer in plain words. "I'm building something," he said. "I'm going to call it a kingdom because I think the word is the most honest one for what I want it to be. The shinobi villages are old and they hurt their children to feed their armies, and I think a different model is possible. I want allies. I want missing nin who are sick of running. I want exiles who have been waiting for somewhere to land. I want this country to be the first stone of it. Wave will be a free state. It will be under my protection. Its sailors will fly my colors when they want to. Its bridge will be my road east. I'd like the 2 of you to be my first sworn captains. I would like Haku to learn from the best healers in the world, because his hands were made for that as much as for killing. And I would like Zabuza-san to stop pretending he likes killing, because anyone with eyes can see it has been hurting him for a decade." Zabuza, who had been chewing on a toothpick, took the toothpick out and put it on the table. "You're 12, he said. "I am." "And you think I'm going to swear to a 12-year-old? "I think you already have, Zabuza-san. I think you swore the moment I poured you tea instead of cutting your head off. I think you've been waiting for me to ask. I'd like you to say yes out loud, though, so Haku can hear it. The boy deserves to hear his guardian make a choice that isn't about running." Haku, sitting beside him, started to cry. Zabuza stared across the table at Naruto for a long time. His shoulders, which had carried the weight of a country's worst week for 10 years, came down a quarter of an inch. He picked up the cup of tea in front of him. He drank it. He set it back down. "Yes," he said. "Thank you." Naruto stood. "Stay here until I send for you. Build something. Train the locals to defend themselves. When the day comes, you'll know." Team 7 left Wave on the 8th morning. The villagers lined the road for a mile. They threw flowers. They had not thrown flowers for anyone since the daimyo's wedding. Tazuna stood at the front of them with his granddaughter at his side, and the little girl saluted Naruto in a tiny formal bow that her grandfather must have taught her overnight. And Naruto crouched and returned the bow with full court formality, and the village wept. Kakashi walked behind his 3 students with his hands in his pockets and his orange book unopened and his Sharingan still tingling with the memory of the Barrock, and he understood, finally, what the Hokage had meant by recalibrate. The Chunin exams were announced 2 weeks later. Konoha filled with foreign genin in the days leading up to the exam. The streets were noisier than they had been in years. The tea houses ran out of foreign coin 3 days early and had to start trading in barter. The Hokage's office processed 500 entry forms in a week and ran their 3 slowest clerks into the ground. Naruto walked through the registration line on the first day in a fresh set of robes, these in a pale gold silk that caught the sunlight like a sail. Sakura had taken to walking on his left because the women in the streets had stopped staring at her when she did. Sasuke walked on his right because the position offered a clear line of sight to anyone foolish enough to test their team. Neither of them had said any of this out loud. He saw the Sand siblings near the courtyard fountain. Kankuro had a small boy in a blue scarf held up by the front of his shirt, and Kankuro was saying something he thought was funny. The small boy was Konohamaru, the Hokage's grandson, and Konohamaru's face was the color of bad milk. Naruto did not raise his voice. He simply walked over. Kankuro turned, saw him, and his amusement curdled. "What do you want, Blondie?" Naruto held out his hand. "Put him down, please." Kankuro grinned, the bravado of a 16-year-old in front of a girl he was trying to impress. He moved to drop Konohamaru on his head from full extension, and Naruto's hand was on the back of Kankuro's wrist before Kankuro's brain had registered the motion. The wrist locked. The arm bent the way Kankuro's elbow had not been designed to bend. Konohamaru landed gently on his feet, and Naruto's other hand was holding Konohamaru by the shoulder to steady him, and Konohamaru looked up at the older boy with his eyes round. "Run home to your grandfather, Konohamaru-kun," said Naruto. "I'll come visit you for ramen tonight." Konohamaru ran. Naruto released Kankuro's wrist. Kankuro stumbled back, shaking out his arm, glowering. The puppet on his back rattled. "Listen, you! Hush, Kankuro-san!" Naruto had already turned away from him. His attention had moved. Temari of the Sand was standing at the edge of the fountain with her arms crossed and her giant fan strapped to her back. She had been smirking at her brother's discomfort a moment ago. She was no longer smirking. Naruto was walking toward her at the unhurried pace he reserved for the things he intended. He stopped close, closer than was strictly polite. She did not step back. She was a kunoichi of the Sand. She had been trained from the age of 6 not to flinch from anyone for any reason. "Forgive my rudeness," said Naruto. "Your brother needed a small correction. I'd rather not have led with that. I had been planning to introduce myself across the fountain like a gentleman." He raised his right hand. He brushed a strand of her sand-pale hair behind her ear with 2 fingers. The fingers barely touched her temple. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki," he said. "You are breathtaking." Temari blinked. Her ears went pink. "Your name?" he asked, smiling. "Temari." It came out too fast, corrected. "Temari of Sunagakure. Temari of Sunagakure." He repeated it as if tasting it. A fierce wind from the desert. "Tell me, Temari-san, when the exams are finished and you have stomped half of these brats into the dirt and added a flak vest to your collection, would you let me take you east? The land of tea has beaches that face the rising sun. The water is the color of your fan when the sun hits it. I'd like to walk one of those beaches with you, and I'd like to listen to you tell me what you think of the world." Temari's mouth opened. No words happened. Her mouth closed. It opened again. Her hand, which had been on the grip of the fan over her shoulder, slid off and dangled at her side like it belonged to somebody else. She made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sigh, and was certainly a surrender. "Aye," she managed. "Take your time, Temari-san." He stepped back half a pace, gave her room. "You have until the end of the exams to decide. Either answer is fine. I'd just like the answer to be yours." Kankuro was making strangled noises in the background. Sakura had her face in both hands. Sasuke was looking at the sky with an expression that suggested he was reconsidering all of his prior assumptions about what it meant to be a man. Gaara of the Sand had been silent up to this point. He stood 3 paces behind his siblings with his arms crossed and the gourd of sand on his back, and he had been studying Naruto since the moment the boy had crossed the courtyard. The thing inside Gaara had been studying Naruto too. Shukaku, the one tail, scratched at the inside of his vessel's chest with a feeling it had not felt in a very long time. The feeling was recognition. Gaara took 1 step forward. Sand stirred at his ankles. His teal eyes, ringed with the dark circles of a boy who had not slept in years, fixed on Naruto across the courtyard. "Mother says your blood is different," said Gaara. Naruto turned. He looked at Gaara across the fountain. He did not look afraid. He did not look surprised. He looked at Gaara with the warm, knowing patience of a man who has met a brother he did not know he had. "Your mother sounds wise, Gaara-san," he said. "I'd like to hear more from her. May we speak after the first stage of the exam?" The sand at Gaara's ankles stilled. "Yes," said Gaara. He did not understand the word coming out of his own mouth. "We will speak." He turned and walked away. His siblings followed him, Kankuro shooting one last glower over his shoulder, Temari moving in a daze with one hand still pressed unconsciously to the place behind her ear where Naruto's fingers had brushed her skin. Sakura found her voice. "Naruto." "Yes, Sakura?" "You can't just—" "I really can," he said, and offered her his arm. "Come, we're late for the first phase. The proctor is a man named Ibiki Morino, and he's about to enjoy himself far less than he expected to." The written exam was a paper Sasuke and Naruto finished in 12 minutes, and Sakura finished in 18. The 10th question was a bluff. Naruto answered it before Ibiki had finished delivering the trap, which annoyed Ibiki and amused Anko Mitarashi, who was watching through the window from the next building over, and made a note to herself to find a reason to talk to the tall blonde later. The second phase began at the gates of Training Ground 44, the Forest of Death, at 10 in the morning. Anko stood on a stump in front of 48 squads and shouted at them. She enjoyed this part of her job. She was halfway through her standard speech about how at least half of them would die and the proper amount of fear they should be experiencing when she made the small error of throwing a kunai at the new shiny target in the front row to make her point about reaction time. Naruto caught the kunai by the edge of the blade between thumb and forefinger without looking up from the scroll he had been signing. He held the kunai up over his shoulder, hilt out, for Anko to take back. The clearing went silent. Anko closed her mouth. She walked with as much dignity as she could find between the squads to the front row. She took the kunai out of his hand. Her hand brushed his. Her hand did not pull away. "What's your name, handsome?" "Naruto Uzumaki, Anko-san." "How old are you?" 12. "That's a shame. I'll be older in a few years, Anko-san. The world keeps moving." She made another mental note. She walked back to her stump. She did not finish her speech. The forest swallowed 48 squads at noon. Naruto walked through the trees with his team behind him. Sasuke had his Sharingan active. Sakura had her hand on her kunai. Naruto had his hands in his sleeves and his attention on the Rook. The Rook was upset. It had been upset since they entered the trees. There was something in the forest that the flow of destiny did not like. Something with a slithering shape and a yellow eye and an appetite for boys with bloodlines. Naruto stopped at the second hour. He turned to Sasuke. "Sasuke, there's a Sannin in these trees, and he's looking for you. He's a man named Orochimaru. He intends to bite you on the neck and put a curse mark on you that he's been using to break and steal children. We're going to meet him soon. I'd like you to stay behind me when we do. I'd like Sakura to stay behind you. He will try to overwhelm you with killing intent, and the killing intent will be real. Sasuke, I need you to remember that the killing intent will pass, and I will still be here when it does. Understand?" Sasuke had stopped walking. "How do you know any of that?" "The Rook told me, in its way." Naruto smiled at him. The smile was the warm one. "I know it doesn't make sense to you yet. Trust me for next 10 minutes. After that, you can ask me whatever you want over dinner." Sasuke set his jaw. He nodded. Sakura's hand was tighter on her kunai. They walked 20 more meters, and the killing intent hit them like a thrown wall. It was a true Sannin's killing intent. It had been refined over 40 years on 100 battlefields and against opponents who had included 2 Kages, 3 Jinchuriki, and approximately 400 named Jonin. It was the kind of killing intent that decided fights before the fights happened, that made elite Anbu freeze with their kunai halfway drawn, that produced, in the present case, the immediate physical collapse of Sasuke Uchiha, who dropped to one knee with his hand on his throat and his Sharingan still spinning and his breath coming in shallow gulps. Sakura did not collapse. She also did not move. She had become a statue with a kunai in its hand, her eyes wide, her body refusing to obey her. Naruto did not feel it. He had crossed deserts where the sun had wanted to kill him personally. He had stared down the eyes of a Djinn of wrath in a chamber of blue stone. He had walked away from the bridge and wave covered in another man's blood without flinching. The killing intent of one Sannin, however refined, was a breeze across his face. He stepped past his teammates and stood between them and the figure that detached itself from the trunk of a nearby tree. Orochimaru, I presume? The Sannin, disguised in the borrowed face of a grass kunoichi, paused. The killing intent should have buckled the boy. The boy had not buckled. The boy had also called him by his correct name, which the boy should not have been able to do. My. The grass face was holding, but the voice was slipping toward its true register. What an interesting little fox you are. You slither in the dirt, snake, targeting children. How unseemly. Naruto's voice was conversational. He sounded mildly disappointed in a colleague. Orochimaru abandoned the disguise. The grass face peeled away in long ropes of borrowed skin, and the Sannin stood in the trees in his own pale skin and his own yellow eyes. His tongue flicked. He stepped down from the branch and onto the forest floor. You're him then, the little container the village kept under glass. I thought you would be smaller. I was once. Naruto smiled at him. The smile was the warm one again, which was the wrong smile to use on a Sannin, and that was exactly why he used it. I went on a trip. You should try it, Orochimaru-san. The road clears the head. Orochimaru weaved his hands into a summoning seal. He had been planning to test the Uchiha. The Uchiha was on his knees, useless for now. He had a different test in mind. He bit his thumb and slammed his palm to the dirt. Two massive vipers boiled out of the smoke and reared up, their hoods spread, their fangs gleaming, their bodies as thick as ancient tree trunks. The trees around them creaked. One of them snapped a 10-foot pine in half just by leaning against it. The vipers struck at Sakura and Sasuke. Sakura screamed. Naruto's right hand moved. He touched the golden ring on his right middle finger. His voice did not rise. He simply spoke. Zippar. The shout he released next was not a shout in the ordinary sense. It came out of his throat in a focused beam of pure compressed sound, the frequency tuned to penetrate flesh rather than air, and it crossed the clearing in a flash. It struck both vipers in their open mouths. It traveled down their spines. Their nervous systems received a command they had no defense against. Both vipers went limp in mid-strike. They crashed to the forest floor, one of them landing half across Sasuke without crushing him, only because Naruto's left hand had pushed it aside in the same motion as his right. Their massive eyes glazed over. Their tongues lolled. They were sleeping with the deep, untroubled sleep of summoned beasts that had been ordered, on a frequency they could not refuse, to rest. Orochimaru's mouth opened. Naruto did not give him time. He touched the silver bracelet on his right arm. He took a single step forward, and the world around him filled with wind, Focalore. Dark feathers raced up his legs. The Djinn Equip of Focalore was only partial. Feet and calves, a band across his lower back, a thin third eye on his forehead that opened and closed once, but it was enough. Naruto pivoted on his left foot, loaded the rotation through his hips and his spine and his right leg, and swept his right foot through the air in a circular kick. A tornado the size of a tree formed on his heel. The tornado left his foot as a wind blade and crossed the clearing in the time it took Orochimaru to blink. It hit the Sannin under his outstretched right arm, at the shoulder, and tore the arm off cleanly. The arm flew. Orochimaru flew with it in the opposite direction, his body pinwheeling backward through the trees. He uprooted 2 oaks and a beech on the way. He came down 30 meters away in a tangle of branches and dirt and his own blood. And the blood was real, and the pain was real, and his yellow eyes were wide with something that was almost an emotion. Naruto walked across the clearing. He passed Sasuke, who was staring up at him with his Sharingan still active, and his entire understanding of combat in the process of being rewritten in real time. He passed Sakura, who had finally moved enough to lower her kunai, but had not been able to remember how to speak. He reached the place where Orochimaru lay in the wreckage of the trees. He looked down at the Sannin. I will become the king of this world. He said it without raising his voice. He said it as a fact. He said it the way a man names the river he intends to dam. I don't have time for pests like you. Orochimaru's good hand moved toward a seal. Naruto crouched and caught the wrist before the seal could complete. I'm not going to kill you today, Orochimaru-san. I want you to live. I want you to go back to whatever hole you came out of, and I want you to think about what just happened. I want you to tell your friends, the masked man, the silver-haired one, the boy with the rings, that the king of the seven seas has noticed them. I want them to spend the rest of their lives knowing that the world is about to belong to me. Do you understand? Orochimaru's eyes were yellow and wide and not quite focused. Yes, he hissed. Good. Naruto released the wrist. He stood. Go. Orochimaru went. He sank into the earth like water. The tree wreckage shifted as his body slid down into a tunnel that closed itself behind him. The arm Naruto had taken off remained in the clearing, twitching faintly in the dirt. Naruto picked the arm up by the wrist. He examined it. Sasuke, he said. Sakura. They came up beside him slowly. Sasuke's Sharingan was still active. Sakura's hand was finally steady on her own kunai. Are you hurt? No, said Sasuke. The word came out like he was practicing it. Are you afraid? Sasuke considered this. He looked at the arm in Naruto's hand. He looked at the boy holding it. He looked at the two felled vipers in the path of broken trees 30 meters into the woods. Yes, he said honestly. Good, said Naruto, and his smile was warmer than it had been all day. Fear is information. He was the strongest man in the world a year ago. He's the second strongest now. Don't be ashamed of fearing him. Let it teach you. We've taken his right arm. The man cannot weave one-handed seals. The first phase of his plans for the next decade is dead today. The world will be safer because we walked into this forest. Do you understand what we just did? Sasuke was silent for a long time. Then, yes, Sakura, she nodded. Her throat had remembered how to swallow. Come. He tossed the arm aside. There's still a tower we need to reach. Let's not be the team that takes a week to clear a 5-day forest. They reached the central tower in 18 hours. Sakura did not sleep that night. She sat against the wall of the inner chamber with her arms around her knees, and she watched her two teammates. Sasuke had passed out the moment they had reached the safe zone. Naruto sat near the fire with his eyes open, his magoi flowing visibly around him in slow gold spirals as he restored what he had spent. He noticed her watching. He did not say anything for a while. Then he stood, came across the chamber, sat down beside her, and put a folded blanket over her shoulders. Sakura. Yes, you are very brave. She laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. I was a statue. You stood your ground next to a Sanin's killing intent at 12 years old. The statue is the brave part. Most adult shinobi would have run. You decided that you were going to stay with us even if it killed you. Do you understand what that means about you? Sakura was crying. She had not meant to. I'm not strong, Naruto. You will be. He said it simply. He meant it. You have the smartest mind in our class. You have the temper to back the smartness up. The chakra control you already have is the foundation of every great medic who has ever lived. I'd like to introduce you to a woman in the next month. Her name is Tsunade. She's the best medic in the world, and she stopped working, and I'm going to convince her to start again. And I'd like her to take you on. She will hurt you, Sakura. She will yell at you and break your bones in training. She will also turn you into a kunoichi, the land of fire will tell stories about. Will you accept the introduction? Sakura wiped her face. She nodded. Good. He squeezed her shoulder once. He stood. Sleep? Sasuke and I are awake. She slept. The 5 days passed. 26 teams made it to the tower. 26 was too many. The Hokage announced a preliminary round to thin the field, and the brackets were drawn from a board. Naruto's first round opponent was Neji Hyuga. The pairing surprised no one. The arena was a square pit with a stone floor and a high gallery, and the Jonin were instructed to file up into the galleries while the matches went on below. Hinata Hyuga stood with her team in the upper level, her white eyes fixed on the floor. She had drawn an opponent in the third match. She was already grateful that Naruto would fight before her so that she could see him win something. Neji stepped down into the pit first. He moved with the certainty of a clan prodigy who had been told all his short life that he was the future of his branch of the Hyuga, which was the lesser branch, which had a curse seal on its forehead, which Neji had decided would be the central tragedy of his philosophy. Naruto stepped down after him at the unhurried pace of a man arriving at a dinner he was looking forward to. His robe settled around him. The 7 pieces of gold caught the overhead light. The two boys stood 10 meters apart on the stone floor. The proctor, a wheezing man named Hayate, raised a hand. Neji looked at Naruto across the floor. His Byakugan was already active. The veins around his pearl-white eyes stood out in fine lines. He was reading Naruto's chakra system. He was seeing the tenketsu, the flow, the reserves. He was seeing, in the boy across from him, an absurd amount of chakra. He was also seeing something else around the boy that the Byakugan refused to render. A fog of nothing, of unchakra, of a substance the Hyuga eye had no protocol for. He attributed the fog to fatigue. He dismissed it. "You adorn yourself in gold to hide your weakness," said Neji, his voice carried in the pit. "The Byakugan sees your fate. You will lose." Naruto smiled at him. The smile was patient and a little sad. "You are chained by your own mind, Neji." The proctor brought his hand down. "Begin." Neji moved. The Hyuga moved fast. He came in low, in the gentle fist stance, his palms loose at his sides, his eyes locked on the tenketsu in Naruto's chest. He intended to seal 64 of them in 5 seconds. He intended to leave Naruto on the floor coughing blood. He intended to demonstrate, in front of the Hokage and the assembled Jonin and the entire class of his year, that fate could not be argued with. Naruto raised his right hand and touched the gold necklace at his throat. Valifor. He did not move otherwise. He stood in the center of the pit with his hands at his sides and his weight slightly back on his left heel, and he watched Neji come. Neji noticed it on the 3rd step. His Byakugan registered the change first. The air between him and Naruto was getting heavier. It was getting heavier in a way the Byakugan had no name for. His 3rd step was slower than his 2nd. His 4th step was slower than his 3rd. His 5th step was so slow he could feel each muscle in his thigh fire in sequence. He pushed. His body did not push. He was 8 meters away. Then he was 8 meters away for what felt like a very long second. Then he was 7.5 meters away. Then 7, then 6.5, and his Byakugan was showing him Naruto standing still with a faint warm smile and the world between them moving like cold honey. His mind began to slow. He thought through the slowing of his own thoughts. He thought about how strange it was that his thoughts were so slow. He thought about how that thought, too, was slow. His leading finger, the right index, extended in the first strike of the 64 palms, reached toward Naruto's chest. The finger was a centimeter from the silk robe, then a half a centimeter, then a quarter. He stopped. He had not chosen to stop. The world had stopped him. His finger hung in the air, a hair's breadth from Naruto's heart, and his body was locked in a perfect frozen stride, his back leg extended, his front leg planted, his face caught in the focused expression of a man delivering a killing blow. His Byakugan was open and seeing nothing it could process. Naruto looked down at the finger. He looked up at Neji's eyes. He smiled. He stepped around him. He walked a full circle around Neji at a leisurely pace. He examined the Hyuga from every angle, the way an artist might examine a piece he had finished setting in place. He came back around to the front. He glanced up. He looked at the upper gallery, where Hiyashi Hyuga sat among the assembled clan heads with his arms crossed and his Byakugan flickering active and inactive as he watched. The two men's eyes met across the pit. Hiyashi's expression did not change. His knuckles went a shade whiter on the arms of his seat. Naruto held his eyes for a long moment. Then he gave the slightest of nods, a courtier's nod, the kind one gives an equal at a diplomatic function, and looked away. He reached out and tapped Neji once on the back of the neck. The stasis released. Every molecule of motion that had been held back came home all at once. Neji's body finished the strike that had been interrupted, and his fingertips stabbed the air where Naruto had been. The momentum carried him 3 steps past where Naruto had originally stood. He turned. He tried to bring his hands up. His body, drained from the impact of returning to its own kinetic energy after 60 seconds of total stasis, refused. His knees folded. He fell forward onto the stone floor and did not rise. The arena was silent. Naruto turned toward the gallery. His voice carried perfectly. He did not need to project. The acoustics, like everything else in his life lately, were on his side. Your birdcage is an illusion. Anyone can fly if they simply choose to spread their wings. He looked at Hinata in the upper gallery when he said it. Hinata was crying. Her hands were over her mouth. Her father was looking at her, then at the boy in the pit, then back at her. Hiyashi Hyuga's expression did not change for the remainder of the match. The knuckles on the chair arms went whiter still. Hayate raised a hand. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. Kakashi was leaning on the railing above. His one visible eye was on his student. He did not look surprised. He looked, if anything, a little tired. He had reached the part of his career where the words "my student" were going to start being said by other jonin with a certain expression, and he had decided this was a fine career stage to be in. Sasuke was 3 meters down the gallery from him. The Sharingan was active in Sasuke's left eye, just the left, the way it had been since the forest. He was watching Naruto walk back across the pit. He was committing every detail to a memory that he intended to use, in some way he had not yet decided, for the rest of his life. The fury was still in him. The fury was no longer about Itachi. The fury had a new shape now. It was the shape of a goal. Sakura was beside him. She was looking at Hinata. Hinata had stopped crying and was now standing very upright with her hands folded in front of her, and her white eyes shining with something that was not quite tears and was not quite anything else. Sakura, who had always been the kind of girl who noticed how other girls looked at the boys they wanted, took one beat to understand. She did not feel jealous. She felt oddly protective. The pit cleared. The next match was called. The preliminaries ran their course. Sasuke won his match by interrupting the curse mark Orochimaru had failed to deliver in the forest, channeling his fury into a clean and ruthless display of speed that left his Oto opponent unconscious in 2 minutes. Sakura won hers by exploiting her opponent's anger, which she had been studying for the last week, and which she used against Ino in a match that ended with both girls on the floor and Sakura's hand a half-inch closer to the floor than Ino's. Hinata fought her cousin's teammate and lost narrowly, with grace, and Naruto met her at the foot of the stairs and walked her back to her team's gallery box with his hand on the small of her back. And Hinata's father watched all of it from the upper level with an expression that was getting harder to read by the hour. The advancement was announced. The finals would be in 1 month. The Hokage left the arena to return to his tower, and Hiruzen Sarutobi paused at the door long enough to lock eyes with Naruto across the room and inclined his head a single degree. Naruto returned the gesture. The month passed. Konoha trained. Sasuke went off into the mountains with Kakashi for personalized work, which Kakashi had agreed to because Sasuke had asked him plainly, and because Naruto had told Kakashi privately that the Uchiha would either become a hero or a weapon in the next year, and the difference might come down to who had been honest with him in the next 30 days. Sakura began training under a woman who had not yet arrived in Konoha by working through a scroll of foundational medical jutsu that Naruto had handed her with a smile. Hinata trained at the Hyuga compound under her father's quietened eye and felt, for the first time in years, that the white eyes upon her were not measuring her against an inheritance she could never claim. Naruto trained alone. He spent most of his time in a clearing in the woods north of the village. His 7 pieces of jewelry laid out on a flat stone in a circle around him. His eyes closed, his breath slow. He was preparing. The Rook had been agitated for 2 weeks. Something was coming. It would arrive at the finals. It arrived on the morning of the 3rd match. The finals were held in the great open-air arena on the southern edge of the village, with the Cobb box at the south end and the gallery seats packed with civilians and shinobi and visiting dignitaries from a 12 countries. Naruto sat on the competitor's bench in his pale gold robes and watched the first 2 matches with his hands loose in his lap. The first was a quick win for Shikamaru Nara against a Suna girl whose hands had been faster than her brain. The second was Sasuke against Gaara. Sasuke's match was a study in escalation. He had grown sharper in the month away with Kakashi. His speed was real. His Chidori was clean. He pressed Gaara hard, and Gaara, who had spent the month plotting his transformation, was forced to begin it ahead of schedule. The sand began to crawl over his arm in the pattern that everyone in the upper boxes recognized, but could not yet name. The hand seals began in the Kage box. They were quick, professional, and synchronized. 4 sound shinobi, disguised as Anbu, dropped a barrier around the rooftop where the Hokage sat with the 4th Kazekage. The barrier was purple, and the barrier was perfect. And inside the barrier, the fourth Kazakage's face peeled off in long ribbons, and the face beneath it had only one arm and yellow eyes and was smiling at Hiruzen Sarutobi. The invasion began on Orochimaru's signal. Sand and sound shinobi flooded over the walls of Konoha from 3 directions at once. Civilian genjutsu rolled over the audience and put half of them to sleep. Explosions tore at the western and northern barracks. The Chunin exam finals became, in the space of 1 minute, the opening note of a war. In the arena, Gaara collapsed inward on himself. The sand around his body inflated. He was no longer Gaara. He was becoming Shikaku. Sasuke leaped back from the swelling mass, and Kakashi was at his elbow in an instant, ordering the Uchiha back into the gallery. The Suna siblings, who had been told this was the plan, ran toward the arena wall to retrieve their brother. Naruto stood from the bench. He walked to the edge of the arena. He looked up. The sky over Konoha was filling with smoke from 3 directions. The Hokage mountain was lit in flashes from the rooftop where the barrier glowed. A column of sand was forming in the center of the arena and was rising into the shape of a beast he had read about in the books the old man had given him as a child. He spoke without looking at anyone in particular. "I'll handle Shukaku. Kakashi-sensei, please bring as many civilians out of the western shelters as you can. Sasuke, Sakura, protect the Genin who can't fight. Find Hinata. Find Ino. Stay together. I'll come for you when this is done." Kakashi did not argue. He gave the orders, gathered Sasuke and Sakura, and ran for the western edge of the village. Naruto leaped from the arena wall. He did not land on the field. He did not run on the ground. He channeled Magoi into Bale's metal vessel as he was still in the air, and the lightning answered him. Blue current threaded out of his scimitar and his rings and his earring and wrapped him in a slow, rising spiral, and his silk robes billowed out around him as the updraft caught them. And he ascended. He floated above the arena. The sand beast had reached its full height. Shukaku, the one-tail, stood on its hind legs in the center of the arena, with its mouth opening wide and its yellow eyes fixed on the western quadrant of the village where the civilian shelters were. A tailed beast bomb was forming in its throat. The orb was the color of dried blood and the size of a house, and it was charging fast. Naruto rose to its eye level. He looked at it across the air, his hair lifting in the static, his robes billowing, his hand on the hilt of his scimitar. He looked, in that moment, like an angel of judgment painted in a foreign country and brought home in a ship. He addressed the village beneath him without looking down. "It's time to show this village what true power looks like." He drew the scimitar. He raised it to the sky. He spoke the words, "Djinn of wrath and heroes, dwell in my body." The full Djinn Equip of Bale exploded outward around him. It was not a transformation that happened in stages. It happened all at once. 2 great horns tore upward from his temples and curled back over his head. Blue dragon scales raced across every surface of his body in a single heartbeat. A layered armor of living lightning crystallized over his chest, arms, and legs in plates that flickered between solid and pure energy. A tail of pure blue current uncoiled behind him, long enough to brush the rooftops below. A halo of concentrated electricity rang his shoulders and his head, and the air around him became too charged to breathe. His scimitar in his hand was no longer a sword. It was a shaft of pure blue lightning shaped like a sword, twice as long as it had been, humming with a frequency that made the windows of the arena buzz. He was a god in the air over his village. Shukaku, who had been a moment from firing, paused. Even the beast's fractured mind recognized what it was looking at. Gaara's broken soul, somewhere inside the sand, recognized too. The tailed beast bomb, half formed in the great mouth, wavered. Naruto looked at the beast across the air. He did not look afraid. He looked, if anything, sorry. "Forgive me, brother. This is going to hurt." Shukaku fired. The tailed beast bomb left its mouth in a torrent of red-black energy that crossed the air toward the western quadrant. The shockwave alone tore tiles off the roofs, 3 streets in either direction. The sound was the sound of a small mountain falling on its side. Naruto raised his scimitar to the sky. Bararok Inkarat Saika. The lightning sword of extinction descended. It came down from the storm clouds that had gathered above Konoha in the last 60 seconds. A single, colossal blade of pure blue lightning, as long as a city block and as wide as the arena. It fell in a straight vertical line out of the heavens. It met the tailed beast bomb in midair over the village. It cut the bomb in half. The two halves of the detonation rolled outward in opposite directions like a sliced fruit. The southern half blew sideways and dissipated against the cliffs of the Hokage mountain in a flash that lit the carved faces of the Hokages in red for 1 second. The northern half blew the other way and broke against the empty training fields outside the wall, leaving a crater the size of a swimming pool that boiled for a week afterward. The lightning sword of extinction continued downward, having sheared the bomb apart and struck Shukaku in the shoulder. The sand beast's right arm, sand formed and 40 feet long, severed at the joint and crashed to the arena floor in a cloud of dust that hung over the village for an hour. The remaining lightning earthed itself into the arena stones and left a glassed black scar where it touched. Shukaku staggered. The beast roared. The roar was less rage and more confusion. The thing inside the sand had not been hurt in a long time. It did not remember the etiquette of pain. It tried to charge another bomb. The charge fizzled. Its focus had broken with its arm. Its vessel, Gaara, somewhere deep inside, had been jolted awake by the shock. The sand began to fall. Naruto descended. He let the full Djinn Equip recede in the descent. The dragon scales melted back into his skin. The horns retracted. The lightning armor faded into a residual blue glow on his fingertips. The halo dispersed. By the time he reached the height of the arena floor, he was a tall blonde in pale gold silk again, with a scimitar in his hand and a faint smell of ozone clinging to his clothes. He caught Gaara in the air. The boy fell out of the collapsing sand limp, his red hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes closed. Naruto caught him under the arms before he hit the arena floor and lowered him to the stone with the gentleness of an older brother lowering a sick child into a bed. The arena was silent. The invasion still raged in the village around them. Smoke still climbed from the western and northern barracks. The Hokage's barrier still flashed purple on the roof. But the arena itself, where the lightning sword of extinction had descended, was perfectly still. Naruto knelt beside Gaara. He brushed the red hair off the boy's forehead. He looked at the kanji for love that someone, Gaara himself, in a moment Naruto could only guess at, had carved into the skin above his eye. He spoke. His voice was warm and low. "You don't have to be a monster, Gaara. Join me and I will show you a world where you are loved." Gaara's eyes opened. They were red-rimmed. They were focused on Naruto's face for the first time without the haze of Shukaku between them. "Why?" he whispered. "Would you say that to me?" "Because it's true." Naruto smiled at him. The smile was the warm one. "And because I think you've been waiting your whole life for someone to mean it." "I mean it." Gaara cried. He had cried before, but those tears had been the tears of the boy who had been left behind. These were the tears of the boy who had just been seen. He covered his face with his hands and turned his head away and wept into the sand of his own gourd. And Naruto sat beside him on the arena floor and put a hand on his shoulder and waited. Temari arrived first, sprinting across the field with her fan loose in her grip. She skidded to a stop at the edge of the arena. She saw her brother on the ground. She saw the tall blonde sitting next to him with his hand on his shoulder. She saw her brother weeping. She made a sound she had not made since their mother had died. She came across the arena fast. She dropped to her knees on Gaara's other side and put her arms around him without saying anything. Kankuro arrived 10 seconds later and stood over them with the puppet on his back and his face doing things his face had not done since he was 8. Naruto stood. He met Temari's eyes across her brother. "Take care of him, Temari-san. I have to go help the Hokage." She looked up at him. Her cheeks were wet. She had 100 things to say. She said the one that came up first. "Yes." He inclined his head to her, the same courtier's nod he had given her father, and turned and ran for the Hokage Tower. The battle at the Hokage Tower was nearly over by the time he arrived. Hiruzen Sarutobi had been driven to his knees on the rooftop and was holding off Orochimaru and 2 summoned previous Hokages with the seal of the Reaper Death half-formed in his hands. The barrier still glowed. The 4 sound shinobi maintaining it were sweating and bleeding. Naruto landed on the roof outside the barrier. He touched the silver necklace at his throat. The Djinn there was furfur, of darkness, of rending. The element of furfur was a thing that ate magical barriers the way fire eats paper. Furfur. Dark wings sprouted from his back. He took a single step forward and drove his fist through the barrier from outside. The barrier did not crack. The barrier vanished. The four sound shinobi maintaining it screamed and collapsed in unison as the recoil of their broken technique flowed back into their chakra systems. The previous Hokage summons, deprived of the barrier's anchor, lost cohesion. Hiruzen, in the middle of a Reaper seal that no longer had a target close enough to bind, let the technique go in a long, shuddering exhale. Orochimaru turned. He saw the boy on the roof. He saw the dark wings. He saw the lightning still flickering on the boy's fingertips. He saw, most importantly, the missing arm on his own body that this boy had taken off him a month before. He had been considering, in the back of his mind for the last month, that perhaps he had overcorrected in fearing the Uzumaki. He had been telling himself that he had been surprised, that the boy had caught him in a moment of recalibration, that next time the encounter would go differently. It would not go differently. He understood that now. He understood it with the perfect clarity that fear delivers to a man who has spent his life refusing to feel it. He vanished. He used a body flicker, a long-range one, the kind that took him 100 miles in a heartbeat at the cost of leaving him barely conscious at the other end. He vanished from the rooftop, and his 3 remaining sound bodyguards vanished with him, and the invasion of Konoha lost its commander in the space of a breath. The sand and sound forces in the village received the signal to retreat 30 seconds later. They fought their way back out the way they had come. The Konoha defenders chased them only to the edge of the wall. The Battle of Konoha was over. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat down on the roof. Naruto crossed to him. He let the furfur Djinn Equip recede. He knelt in front of the old man. "Old man," he said, and his voice was soft. "Are you hurt?" "I'm alive, Naruto-kun." The Hokage smiled at him. The smile was a tired one. "Thanks to you, I'm alive. You held him off without me. Don't take my credit, old man. I just opened the door." Hiruzen laughed. The laugh turned into a cough. The cough did not turn into anything worse, which was a relief. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Sit with me a moment." Naruto sat. They watched the smoke clear over the village. The Hokage Tower had survived. The arena had survived. The Western Barracks had taken damage. The Eastern District had taken damage. The civilian shelters were intact. The casualty count in the end would be lower than any invasion of a hidden village in the recorded history of the shinobi world. "You changed the math today, Naruto-kun." "I changed the math 2 years ago, old man. Today I just showed my work." Hiruzen laughed again. The laugh held, this time. He squeezed the boy's shoulder. "I'm going to retire." "You should." "I'd like Tsunade to take the hat." "She will." "You'll bring her back?" "Yes." "Take Jiraiya with you. He's getting fat. The road will do him good." "It will, old man. So will being told what to do for once by someone who isn't his student." Hiruzen Sarutobi laughed for the 3rd time in 5 minutes, and the laugh held, and the laugh was the laugh of a man who had been carrying the weight of a village for too many decades, and who had just realized he was allowed to set it down. Jiraiya found Naruto on the 3rd floor of the Hokage Tower the next morning. The Sannin was leaning against the wall outside the office, his arms crossed, his red coat hanging loose. He looked Naruto up and down. He took his time about it. "So you're the one." "I'm the one, Jiraiya-sama." "Don't sama me, kid. I knew your father." "I'd like to hear about him on the road if you'll tell me." "I'll tell you." Jiraiya's gruffness slipped a notch. "Old man wants me to take you to find Tsunade." "He does." "You don't actually need me for this trip, do you?" Naruto smiled. "I'd like the company, Jiraiya-sama. You knew my parents. I'd like to walk with you for a few days. The mission part of the mission is incidental." Jiraiya looked at him for a long moment. "All right, kid," he said. "Let's go find the old lady." They left Konoha at dawn. Naruto carried only his sword and his jewelry and a small travel pack. Jiraiya carried a scroll, a sake gourd, and an expression that kept changing as the morning wore on. The first hour was silent. Jiraiya was watching the boy walk, watching the way he moved, the way he carried his weight, the way his Magoi sat in him like a banked fire. By the end of the first hour, Jiraiya had revised his estimate of the trip 3 times and had decided that he was going to spend the next several days mostly listening. They walked along the road toward the gambling towns of the Land of Fire's eastern border. They passed a tea house on the second afternoon. Naruto stopped, went in, came out with 2 paper cups of tea, and handed one to Jiraiya without comment. Jiraiya drank it. It was good tea. By the evening of the second day, Jiraiya had started talking. He talked about Minato. He talked about Kushina. He talked about the night Naruto had been born, the way the Nine Tails had come for the village, the way his teacher had sealed it into the only child available to take it. He talked for hours. Naruto listened. At the end of it, Naruto reached out and put his hand on Jiraiya's shoulder. The Sannin, who had been holding back tears for a long time, let them come for a few minutes in the dark by the campfire. "You were a good godfather, Jiraiya-sensei," said Naruto. "You came as soon as the door opened to you. Don't carry the years before that. They weren't your fault. They were the village's." "I should have." "Should-haves are for boys, Jiraiya. We're going to find Tsunade tomorrow, and we're going to bring her home, and you're going to help me build something for Minato's son to be proud of." "Yes?" Jiraiya looked at him in the firelight. "Yes!" They found Tsunade in a town called Tanzaku. She was in the back of a gambling hall sitting at a table littered with empty sake cups and IOUs. Her apprentice Shizune was at her elbow, embarrassed and devoted, holding a small pig in her arms. Tsunade had lost everything she had bet today, which was about average, and she was about to leave the hall and look for somewhere quieter to be miserable, when the door opened, and a Sannin she had been ignoring for 15 years walked in with a tall blonde boy at his side. She looked at Jiraiya first. She rolled her eyes. She looked at Naruto second. She did not roll her eyes. She saw the sword and the 7 pieces of gold and the silk robe in the face. She saw the way he moved across the room toward her, his hands loose, his shoulders easy, his eyes on her with the warm, steady attention of a man who had been planning this approach for a week. "Tsunade Hime." She narrowed her eyes. "Don't Hime me, kid." "Tsunade-san, then." "Better." He pulled out the chair across from her. He sat down. He took the deck of cards from the dealer's hand with a courteous nod and began to shuffle them. The shuffle was a thing of beauty. His hands moved through it with the ease of someone who had done this in 3 different countries against 3 different kinds of professionals. "What are you doing, brat?" "Playing a hand with you, Tsunade-san. If I lose, I go home. If you lose, you hear me out. Either way, the loser buys the next bottle." Tsunade laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Kid, you don't want to gamble with me. I'm the worst gambler in the country. That's what I'm counting on." She blinked. He dealt the cards. He won. She demanded another hand. He won that one too. She demanded a third. He won. The Rook, which Tsunade could not see but which loved this boy more than any creature in the world, was tipping every shuffle a hair in his favor. He was not cheating. He did not need to. The world was on his side. By the end of an hour, Tsunade had signed away every IOU she had collected in 3 years, 2 outstanding bar tabs, and the deed to a tea garden in the Land of Hot Water she had forgotten she owned. She was laughing. She had been laughing for half an hour. Shizune was sitting 2 tables over with her pig and a strange expression on her face. Naruto stood. He gathered the IOUs and the deed and the bar tabs and stacked them on the table. He pushed the stack across to Tsunade. "Yours, Tsunade-san. I don't want them. You won them. I won them so that you'd know I could. I'm giving them back so that you know I wasn't going to use them. Buy the next bottle?" She bought the next bottle. They drank for an hour. He listened to her talk about her brother. He listened to her talk about Dan. He listened to her talk about the war and about the village and about the way she had stopped being able to look at blood without seeing the people she had lost. He listened. He did not interrupt. He poured her sake when her cup was empty. He did this with the warm attention of a man who had decided in advance of arriving in this town that this woman would matter to him. When she was finished, he set down his own cup. "Tsunade-san, the old man is going to retire. He'd like you to take the hat. I'd like you to take it too. The village is going to need a healer at the top of it for the years ahead. You're the only one who can do that job. The blood will be there. You'll see it. but you'll also see what your hands can do to the blood, and you'll remember why your hands learned to do that. I'm building something, Tsunade-san. I'd like Konoha to be part of it. I'd like you to be the bridge between what the village was and what it's going to become. Will you come home? Tsunade looked at him across the table. She was crying. She had not noticed. She was crying without expression, the kind of tears that come out of a person who has been holding them for 2 decades and has finally found a face across a table that they trust enough to let them out. You're 12. I am. You're 12 and you're asking me to be your Hokage. Yes. She laughed. It came out wet. All right, brat. She started to reach for the sake again. The corridor door of the gambling hall opened. 2 men in black coats with red clouds embroidered on them walked in. The taller one had blue skin and a sword wrapped in bandages on his back. The shorter one had black hair pulled into a low ponytail and red eyes spinning a slow pattern of 3 commas. The gambling hall went silent. The other patrons rose, very politely, and exited through the side doors with the speed of professional men who had survived this long by knowing when to be elsewhere. Itachi Uchiha stopped 3 paces inside the room. Kisame Hoshigaki stopped at his elbow. They had been sent for the 9 tails. They had not expected to find him in a gambling hall with a sanin and a half sanin at his back. They were adjusting their plan in real time. Naruto did not stand up. He set his sake cup down on the table with the slow care of a man finishing a thought before being interrupted. Itachi Uchiha, Kisame Hoshigaki. He said their names like he was greeting old correspondents. I've heard of you both. Please come in. Sit down. There's still sake in the bottle. Kisame's grin spread across his face. Cute. It is, Kisame-san. Thank you for noticing. Kisame swung Samehada off his back. The living sword keened in its wrappings, the sound a hungry animal makes when it smells food. He brought it down toward Naruto's table in a swing that would have taken the table in half, and the boy with it. Naruto caught it. His right hand came up over his head from his seated position. He caught Samehada by the binding wraps an inch above the table. His hand glowed gold. The gold was the gold of Amon's fire, a djinn he had absorbed in his 5th dungeon. A fire that was not chakra and not flame and not anything Samehada had ever been designed to drink. Samehada shuddered. The living sword tried to drink the energy in Naruto's hand and choked on it. The bandages around the blade began to smoke. Kasame's grin slipped a notch. What the hell? Naruto pushed Samehada upward, away from the table with a small flick of his wrist. Kasame stumbled back a step under the force. The shark man's shoulders went square. The first real wariness of his career flickered behind his eyes. Itachi had not moved. His Sharingan was on Naruto. He was reading the boy with the only eyes in the world capable of reading what was in front of them. Even his eyes were reading less than half of it. The chakra was there, vast, but the chakra was the smallest of the energies in the boy. The 7 other things sitting on top of the chakra were inaccessible to him. The Rooks around the boy was inaccessible to him. The Sharingan recorded what it could. It recorded that what it could record was not enough. Itachi understood, in that moment, that they were not leaving this gambling hall with the 9 tails. He had made many calculations in his life. He made this one fast. Naruto stood. He set his cup down on the table. He looked at Itachi across the room. He spoke without raising his voice. Itachi, listen to me. You've been carrying the weight of something for a long time. I see it on you. I'm not going to ask you about it tonight. I'm going to ask you a favor instead. Carry a message back to your leader. Tell him that the king of the 7 seas is claiming this world. Tell him that the Akatsuki has 30 days to disband, to disperse, or to come at me as a single unit and accept what happens next. Tell him the offer for surrender is genuine. The boys you have collected, your members, most of them have stories like yours. I'm willing to listen to those stories. The one I'm not willing to listen to is your leader. He will die. Tell him that too. I want him to know it before I find him. He raised his left hand. The hand began to glow gold. The Amon fire flared on his palm. Go now. He turned his hand toward the wall. The Amon fire released. It crossed the room in a wide arc, not at Itachi, not at Kisame, but past them against the back wall of the gambling hall. The wall was stone. The wall ceased to be stone. The M on fire ate through 3 meters of masonry in a single sweep, leaving a long molten gash through which the night air streamed in. Through the gash, the road was visible. Beyond the road, the forest. Beyond the forest, the long road back to wherever the Akatsuki kept itself. I left you a door. Use it. Kasame looked at Itachi. Itachi was already turning. The Uchiha walked across the room to the gash in the wall, paused at it, and turned back. His Sharingan held Naruto's eyes for one long moment. And in that moment, something passed between them that Tsunade and Jiraiya and Shizune all noticed and could not name. It was not threat. It was not fear. It was the look of a man recognizing the only other person in the room who could see what the room actually contained. Naruto Uzumaki, said Itachi. Itachi Uchiha. My brother. Will live. I have him. He is becoming what he was supposed to become. He will be a hero of his village. I'll see to it personally. The Sharingan held a half-second longer. Itachi inclined his head once. He stepped through the gash. Kasame followed, glancing back over his shoulder, with Samahata keening softly against his back. They were gone in 3 breaths. The gambling hall was silent. Tsunade looked at Naruto. Jiraiya looked at Naruto. Shizune was clutching her pig hard enough that the pig was beginning to complain. Naruto picked up his sake cup. He finished what was in it. He set it down. He looked across the table at Tsunade with the warm smile he had been wearing all evening, as if a corner of a building had not just been removed by a fire that should not have existed. So, he said. So, she echoed. Are you coming to see what the world looks like when someone decides to fix it? Tsunade looked at him for a long time. Then she set down her own cup. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. She stood. She picked up the deed to the tea garden, folded it once, and slid it into the front of her shirt. Yes, brat, I'm coming. He held out his arm to her like a court attendant. She took it. They walked together out of the ruined gambling hall and into the street, where the night air smelled of melted stone and rain that had been promised by clouds but had not yet been delivered. Jiraiya followed them out with Shizune and the pig behind him, and the 4 of them and the small animal walked together down the long lit street of Tanzaku toward the road home. At the edge of the town, Naruto stopped. He looked east, past Tanzaku, past the border, past the long roads he had walked with bleeding heels 2 years ago. There were more dungeons out there. There were more Djinn. There were islands he had been promised by the Rook in the last 6 months. Ones he had been saving for after the village was safe. He could feel them. The flow of destiny had been pulling east since he had stood in the arena and split a tailed beast bomb in half. It was pulling now harder than it had ever pulled before. He smiled. What is it, brat? The world is getting ready to meet me, Tsunade-san. He looked back at her over his shoulder. He looked at Jiraiya. He looked at the road ahead of them, and at the village behind them, and at the long horizon of his own life unfolding in every direction at once. The smile on his face was the warm one, and it was the warmest it had been all day. Let's go home, he said. There's work to do. The road out of Tanzaku ran south through low hills under a sky that had finally made up its mind. The clouds that had threatened rain all evening let the rain come once they were a mile from the gambling hall, and it came warm and slow, the kind of summer rain that does not punish travelers, only baptizes them. Jiraiya pulled the hood of his coat up and grumbled about his hair. Shizune covered the pig with the front of her shirt. Tsunade left her sleeves rolled and her face turned up into the rain and her hands swinging at her sides like a woman who had set down something heavy in a back room and was beginning to remember what her shoulders felt like without it. Brat, she said. Tsunade-san, the hospital wing on the 3rd floor of the main complex has been leaking for 6 years. Hiruzen kept saying he'd get to it. He never got to it. I want it rebuilt before winter. It's done. You're going to pay for it? My household will. I'd like the construction crews to be hired from Wave. They have men who finished a bridge under deadline against a man trying to kill them, and they need the work. Will that be acceptable? She looked sideways at him in the rain. Her hair was wet now. The lantern they were carrying threw warm light up under her chin. You've been planning this drive south the whole way back, haven't you? I've been planning some of it for longer than the drive south. For how long? Since the night I left Konoha at 10. She let that sit between them for a few steps. Jiraiya, behind them, made a small sound. Shizune said nothing because she had decided sometime in the last hour that the best policy for a woman walking behind a future Hokage and a foreign king was to memorize as much as she could and offer her opinion when it was asked for. You knew at 10. I knew at 10 that something was going to be different. The shape came later. By the time I'd taken the third dungeon, I had the outline. By the time I came back to Konoha, I had the architecture. And Konoha is the first stone. Konoha is my home, Tsunade-san. The first stone of a building is the one you set down where you stand. I stand in Konoha, so that's where I'm building. She walked the next 10 paces with her face still up into the rain. The lantern light flickered. Brat, she said again. Yes, Tsunade-san. I'm going to be the worst Hokage in the village's history at paperwork. You'll have help. Whose? Mine. Shizune's. The old man's until he genuinely wants to set the pipe down. Eventually Sasuke's when he's earned a seat. Eventually mine again from the south when the kingdom can spare me. You're going to leave. I'm going to come and go, Tsunade-san. The village is the keel of what I'm building. The keel does not go anywhere. The ship moves around it. Jiraiya muttered something in the back. Tsunade laughed, the same short, sharp laugh she had laughed at the table in the gambling hall. You're a strange kid. I'm the kid I needed to be. They walked through the night and into the next morning. By the time the gates of Konoha came into view at the bend of the road, the rain had stopped and the sun was up, and the rice paddies on either side of the road were full of light that the water gave back doubled. The gate guards saw the four of them coming. One of them, a chunin named Izumo, who had been the man on duty when Naruto walked back into the village 2 years and several lifetimes ago, stood up slowly from his stool. He set down his cup of tea. He nudged his partner. Kotetsu looked up, looked out, and said something that might have been a prayer or a curse. Naruto walked through the gate of his village with Tsunade Senju on his arm. He did not stop walking. His eyes never went to the guards. He nodded once to Izumo in passing, a courtier's nod, the kind he had given Hiyashi Hyuga in the arena, the kind he had given Tamari's father across a fountain, and kept moving. Tsunade walked beside him. Jiraiya walked behind them with his hands in his coat pockets and a small private smile under his hood, because he had spent the night watching a 14-year-old boy run a piece of foreign policy across a road in the rain. And he had decided that whatever else this kid was going to do in his life, watching him do it was going to be one of the great privileges of being Jiraiya. The village was awake. The village had been awake since before dawn. The Hokage Tower had drafted an emergency announcement 2 days ago when word came up the road that Tsunade was returning, and the announcement had gone out by every channel the village had. The runners, the bell at the wall, the boards in the markets. By the time the four of them reached the central square, there were people in every doorway and on every balcony. There were children sitting on rooftops. There were old shinobi who had served under Hashirama leaning on their canes in the open and watching with the wet eyes of men who had thought they had used up their last great memory. Tsunade saw the crowd. She slowed. Brat, this is too much. It's the right amount. They love you, Tsunade-san. They've been loving you for years without your permission. Let them do it out loud for a morning. She squeezed his arm once. She walked. The inauguration was 3 days later. Hiruzen had set it up to be a small ceremony because that was the kind of ceremony he preferred. He had been overruled by every other administrative office in the village, including his own secretary. The ceremony that happened was held in the open plaza in front of the Hokage Tower, and the plaza was so full that the perimeter had to be pushed 2 streets back to accommodate the people who arrived without invitations and would have refused to leave even if asked. Naruto sat in the front row. The seat had been arranged by Hiruzen himself. To his right sat Jiraiya. To his left sat an empty seat that had been reserved by Naruto's request, and the seat remained empty for the first half of the ceremony. And then Hinata Hyuga appeared at the edge of the row in a soft blue kimono, with her hair brushed back and her hands folded in front of her, and she took the seat with her face the color of a peony. Naruto turned his head and smiled at her. He said nothing. He put his hand over hers on the armrest for 1 full second, and then withdrew it. And Hinata Hyuga sat through the rest of the ceremony with her right hand cradled in her lap, as if she were carrying something fragile in it that she meant to take home and press between the pages of a book. When Tsunade walked up the steps in the ceremonial robes, when she turned at the top, when she received the hat from Hiruzen's hands and lowered it onto her own head, Naruto stood. He stood alone in the front row, and the whole plaza saw him stand. And after the second beat, the plaza stood too, every single body of it, in a wave that started from the front and rolled to the back like a swell pushing toward a beach. Tsunade looked down at the boy who had pulled her out of a gambling hall. She did the courtier's nod back to him. The crowd erupted. Hiruzen, in his retirement robes for the first time in nearly 2 decades, sat down on the step beside the podium and let his eyes water freely. He did not wipe them. He earned them. Zabuza Momochi arrived at the gates of Konoha 8 days after the inauguration. He came down the road from the north with Haku at his elbow, and he came in his mist colors, the bandages around his face, the great sword on his back, the dark trousers tucked into the wraps at his calves. He had agreed to make the trip on Naruto's terms, which meant arriving as exactly what he was, with no costume and no smaller face. Haku walked beside him in a pale green yukata with his hair tied back and the senbon pouch on his hip. They looked to the eyes that watched them approach like an act of provocation taking its time getting to the punchline. The Anbu arrived before Zabuza had set foot inside the gate. There were 6 of them in the first wave. There were 9 more in the second, dropping from the rooftops in formation around the entry plaza. The Chunin at the gate stood from their chairs with their hands going to their weapons, and Izumo, who was developing a habit of being the one on duty when historic things happened, opened his mouth to call a verbal warning. Naruto walked out of the crowd. He had been informed of Zabuza's approach the previous evening by his network, which had eyes on every road into the village, and which had reported the man's arrival with appropriate calm. He had positioned himself near the gate for the morning. He stepped out of the small crowd of villagers who had gathered to gawk at the foreign shinobi, and he crossed the plaza at his unhurried pace, and he stopped beside Zabuza with one hand on the older man's shoulder and the other raised toward the Anbu in the gesture of a man holding back a friendly dog. Mine. Stand down. The Anbu held a half second. Then their captain, a woman in a cat mask, who had been at the bridge and wave on a long-range observation mission Naruto had eaten breakfast with her after, lowered her sword. The other Anbu lowered theirs in sequence. They withdrew up onto the rooftops in a fan formation and held there, watching. Naruto turned to Zabuza. He inclined his head. The same courtier's nod. Zabuza made a sound in his chest that had 3 meanings stacked inside it. He pulled his bandages down a half inch and showed Naruto the corner of his mouth, which had performed something close to a smile, and which would have horrified the Anbu on the rooftops if they could see it. Haku, beside him, dropped into a full bow. Stand up, Haku-kun. Naruto's voice was warm. The members of my household bow to nothing and no one except the Rook, and even then only when they feel like it. You will need to learn the difference. Come, Tsunade-sama wants to meet you both. She has agreed to take Haku on rotation in the hospital wing for the autumn. Zabuza-san, you will live in the building across from the Eastern Training Ground. I had the floor reinforced last week. The previous tenant's floor would have given out on you by the end of the month. Zabuza grunted. How'd you know I was coming this week, brat? Because you told me the morning I left Wave that you would be here when the leaves turned, and the leaves are turning. Shh. They walked into the village together. A former missing nin of the mist who had been on the bingo book for a decade, his hunter nin companion, and a 14-year-old boy in pale gold robes, and the village that had once crossed the street when Naruto walked toward them, now stepped aside and watched. And the silence of the watching was its own kind of welcome. That evening, on the roof of a low storage building near the eastern edge of the Hyuga compound, Naruto sat with his elbows on his knees and his face turned toward the moon. He had come up there for an hour of quiet. He had been moving since dawn, and his lungs needed a window without any expectations attached to it. He heard her before he saw her. She came up the ladder with a cloth bundle in one hand and a small lantern in the other, and she set the lantern down on the tiles at the top of the ladder and stood there with her free hand at her chest, as if to slow her own heart. "Hinata, Naruto-kun, come sit, the view is better from over here." She crossed the roof on stockinged feet and lowered herself onto the tiles beside him with the cloth bundle in her lap. The bundle smelled like rice and something fried in sesame oil. She had been working on the recipe for 2 weeks. She had asked her sister for advice, which had been embarrassing, and her sister had given her the advice and then teased her about it for 3 solid days, which had also been embarrassing. And now here she was on a roof at moonrise with the bundle in her lap and the boy she had been writing into pink notebooks beside her, and she had run out of plan. "I brought you dinner?" "Thank you, Hinata." He took the bundle from her hands and unwrapped it across his lap. The food inside was small and beautiful, arranged the way a person arranges things when they have spent more love than time on them. He took up the chopsticks. He ate one piece. He chewed. He swallowed. He turned his face toward her, and his face was warm in the lantern light. "This is the best thing I have eaten in 3 weeks. It is what you made for me with your hands. On an evening when you came up a ladder you had to make yourself climb. The food is excellent. The fact of it is something else. Both are gifts. Thank you." Hinata's eyes filled. She had been determined to make it through the visit without crying. She had failed, but failed in a small way that would be easy to recover from if she could find her voice. I have wanted to bring you food for a long time. I know. You knew? I had a guess." He smiled at her. The smile was the small one he saved for the people he was learning to be soft with. "I didn't want to assume. I wanted you to choose to do it. The choosing matters more than the food, Hinata. Although the food is also excellent. I want to be clear about that." She laughed. The laugh surprised her. It came out wet and small, and it sat between them on the tiles like a third thing they were both watching. He set the bundle down on the tiles. He turned toward her on the roof. The moon was over her shoulder and the lantern was at her hip and his face was in half shadow. "Hinata? Yes? Tell me about your week." She looked at him. She had been prepared for many things. She had been prepared for compliments and for kind dismissals and for the warm, friendly distance she had been treated with by him in public, and which she had been telling herself was as much as she could expect. She had failed to prepare for being asked, without preamble or condition, to tell him about her week. She told him. She told him the small things because she had nothing else to tell. She told him about a training drill with her cousin that had gone better than she expected. She told him about a poem she had been trying to memorize and kept losing in the 3rd stanza. She told him that her sister had stopped teasing her about the pink notebook last month, and she didn't know what it meant, and she was afraid to ask. She talked for almost an hour. He did not interrupt. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his face turned toward her, and his eyes never left her face. And Hinata Hyuga had the experience for the first time in her life of being listened to by someone whose attention was the whole of the world. When she ran down at last, when she sat with her hands folded in her lap and the lantern guttering on the tiles, he reached out and brushed one piece of hair behind her ear with 2 fingers, the same gesture he had used on Tamari in a courtyard months ago. But the gesture meant something different here, and they both knew it. "I'm glad you came up the ladder." Me too. I'm going to be moving in and out of the village a great deal in the coming years. I want you to know that wherever I am, I would like to come back and find you on this roof. May I do that? Yes. Will you come up if I'm not here yet and wait? Yes. He inclined his head, the courtier's nod in a register that turned it into something private. He stood. He picked up the cloth bundle, which was now empty, and folded it and handed it back to her. He helped her to her feet. He walked her to the ladder. He did not kiss her this time. The hand kiss at the academy had been theater for the moment it lived in. This evening had been something else, and he respected the difference enough to let it end without trying to close it with a gesture. She climbed down the ladder. She walked home through the gardens of the Hyuga compound with the empty cloth bundle in her hands, and her father saw her come in from the corner of his study and chose to say nothing about it. Hiyashi Hyuga had been watching his eldest daughter for 2 months with the slow recalibration of a man who has been wrong about something important for a long time, and he had decided that the time for speaking would come when she came to him with it, and not before. Gaara of the Sand arrived in Konoha 3 weeks later. He came in his Kazekage robes. He came with Temari at his right and Kankuro at his left, and the formal delegation behind him numbered 14. Advisors, attaches, 2 captains of the Sand's Guard, a chef. He had been Kazekage for 10 months by then, the youngest in his village recorded history, and the village that had raised him in fear had accepted his elevation with a relief so total it had felt like a single exhale across the desert. The boy who had been broken into a weapon had become, in the 18 months since the Konoha invasion, something the desert had not seen in 2 generations. A Kage who slept. The diplomatic meeting was in the Hokage Tower. Tsunade received him in the main reception chamber with her advisors at her side. Naruto was at her left hand, 3 steps down the dais, in pale gold silk. When Gaara walked into the chamber, when his eyes found Naruto across the room, he stopped at the threshold and lowered his head for 1 full second before he came forward, and every person in the room understood that the rest of the meeting was a courtesy to be conducted around the fact of that gesture. The official conversation took an hour. The treaty was signed. Trade routes were opened. The training exchange program was established. The intelligence sharing protocol. Naruto's network had been operating in the sand for 2 years, with Gaara's blessing, and the protocol was a formality giving the existing operation a paper home, was ratified in 3 sentences afterward. Gaara found Naruto in the courtyard. They walked together along the perimeter of the garden, 2 boys with the weight of nations on their shoulders, and they did not speak for the first 10 minutes. The walking was the speaking. "My sand is quiet, Naruto." "I'm glad, Gaara." It was quiet for the first time the morning after the arena. "I have been waiting for it to come back. It has stayed away. It will not come back the way you knew it. Shukaku is in there with you still, but you have made an arrangement with him that the boy you used to be could never have made. That is what changed. The sand has been quiet because you are. Did you make the same arrangement? I am working on it." Gaara looked sideways at him. "Tell me when it is finished. I will want to know what it sounds like." "I will tell you, Gaara." They walked the rest of the perimeter without speaking again. At the corner near the koi pond, Gaara stopped and put one hand on Naruto's forearm, a touch he would have died before giving anyone at 12, a touch he was learning to give at 14, and pressed once and let go. That evening, after the formal dinner, Temari found him on the western balcony of the guest wing. She had been planning this approach for 2 months. She had drafted an opening in her head 3 different ways, and then thrown all 3 of them out because she had decided, with the particular conviction of a woman who had been deciding things her whole life, that she was going to say what she wanted to say in the order it occurred to her and let him handle the rest. She walked out onto the balcony. He was leaning on the rail with his hair down and a cup of something pale in his right hand. He had heard her coming. He turned and offered her the cup without speaking, and she took it without speaking, and she drank from it. It was warm sake with ginger in it. She handed it back. "Naruto." "Temari-san, I have been thinking about you for 2 years. I'm honored. I'm not finished. I'm sorry. Please continue. I have been thinking about you for 2 years, and I have spent most of that time being annoyed about it. I am tired of being annoyed. I would like to be something else. I do not know exactly what the something else is, but I have decided that I am going to find out, and I have decided that the finding out is going to involve being near you when the war is over. Do you have an objection?" He looked at her. He set the cup down on the rail. He took her hands in his, both of them, palms up, with the unhurried attention he gave everything that mattered to him. And he turned them over and pressed his thumbs into the centers of her palms once and released them. "Temari-san, the war is going to take some of me for a while. I want to be honest with you about that. When it is over, I will have time again, and I will have decisions to make about what my life is going to look like. I would like you in the conversations about those decisions. I would like you near. I am incapable of telling you exactly what the shape of being near will be. I am incapable of that with anyone in my life, because the shape of my life is still being drawn. What I can tell you is that I have thought about you too. I have thought about the way you stood at that fountain and refused to step back, and I have thought about that more than once a week for 2 years. Does that answer your question? She breathed out. The breath she had been holding had been held longer than she'd realized. Her ears were pink again. She was furious about her ears. She decided to ignore them. Yes. Good. He picked up the cup, refilled it from a small pot on the side table, and handed it to her again. Drink. The desert taught you how to drink, but you have been visiting Konoha, and Konoha drinks like a village of monks. Show me how the desert does it. She laughed. She drank. The ginger burned in her chest. She stood with him on the balcony for an hour, and they talked about nothing in particular. And when she went to bed that night in the guest wing, she lay on her back with one hand over her chest where the ginger had landed, and she fell asleep faster than she had in years. Time passes the way water passes when the river has finally been given a direction. In the months after Gaara's visit, Naruto's trade network expanded south and east and west, until by the spring of his 15th year, there was nowhere in the elemental nations a message could not reach him within 3 days. He trained alone in a clearing north of the village 3 mornings a week. He laid out his 7 Djinn in their circle of polished stones, and he meditated until the Magi in his blood found the seams between them. And he learned, in the 2nd year, to draw on more than 1 Djinn at a time without losing the structure of either. Valifor's stagnation laid down as a platform, Baal's lightning drawn across it like wire through clay. Focalor's wind shaped into a vessel, Crochel's fire poured into the vessel, and given a direction it had never been given before. He invented techniques the world had no names for. He named them himself in a small black book that he carried in the inside pocket of his robe, and he showed the book to no one. In his 15th year, he and Kurama began to speak. The speaking was small at first, pressure at the back of his mind, a feeling of being watched from inside, the rare image that landed in his thoughts with a different flavor than his own. Naruto answered each communication out loud in the clearing where he trained, with the warm, respectful attention he gave Tsunade and his mother's memory and Hinata on the roof. The fox responded by withholding less each time. Their relationship in the 2nd year was the relationship of 2 old enemies who had begun, against their will, to like each other. In his 16th year, the Akatsuki sent their first answer. Deidara came from the sky. He had been told, by Pain, in the chamber where the Akatsuki met, that the king of the 7 seas had given them an ultimatum that they were not going to honor, and that the question of what to do about him had been deferred long enough. Deidara had volunteered. He had brought Sasori because Sasori would refuse to let him go alone, and because Sasori had a personal interest in the matter, and because 2 members were better than 1 for this particular target. The clay bird circled over the supply road 2 miles north of Konoha at 6 in the morning. Naruto was alone on the road. He had been alone on the road by choice. He had told his network the night before that he was going to make himself available for an attempt, because the longer the Akatsuki waited, the more men they would send, and he wanted them to begin the math while they were still cheap. Deidara dropped the C3 from 1,000 feet. The C3 was the size of a small whale. It struck the road 4 meters in front of Naruto with the kinetic weight of a falling building, and the detonation that followed produced a crater 70 meters across and a shockwave that flattened the corn in the fields on either side of the road for half a mile. Birds came up out of the trees in a column. Farmers in the next village over felt their windows rattle. Naruto walked out of the crater. His pale gold silk was untouched. The Amon fire was dispersing on his right palm in a faint corona, the residue of the technique he had used to eat the shockwave at his skin. He looked up at the sky. Deidara, hovering on his clay bird at 1,000 feet, swore. "What the hell, yeah!" He sent the C2 dragons. There were 6 of them. They came down in a fan from 6 directions at once, each one capable of leveling a city block, their open mouths charged with smaller clay bombs that would detonate in chain if the dragons themselves were destroyed. The pattern was one Deidara had used to kill the 3rd Kazekage. The pattern had never been countered. Naruto touched the silver bracelet on his right arm. Focalor. The dark feathers raced up his legs and his torso and across his shoulders. His hair lifted at the ends. His feet left the ground. He rose into the air at a speed that made Deidara's eyes widen behind his scope. And he met the lead dragon in the air with his right hand extended in a punch that was sheathed in compressed wind. The dragon detonated against his fist. He rode the detonation. The shockwave that would have killed an ordinary jonin was caught at his skin and redirected outward into the 2nd dragon. And the 2nd dragon detonated in turn against the 3rd, and the 3rd against the 4th. And Deidara watched 4 of his 6 dragons go up in a chain reaction that started at the boy's right hand and ended in a sky-filling fireball that singed his clay bird's wings. The remaining 2 dragons came at Naruto from behind. He pivoted in the air on his left foot. There was no ground under his left foot, but the Focalor Equip did not need ground. And threw a circular kick that sent a wind blade off his heel and across the sky in a wide arc. The wind blade caught both remaining dragons across their midsections and cut them lengthwise, and the clay inside fell as inert grit and failed to detonate. Because Focalor's wind had separated the detonation chambers from the trigger seals on the way through, Deidara screamed in genuine frustration. He pulled the ripcord on his sleeve. The C4 emerged. The C4 was small. The C4 was the size of a marble. The C4 detonated in the air at 20 meters and released a cloud of clay particles too fine for the eye to see, and the cloud was already moving across the gap toward Naruto when Deidara grinned. Inside your blood, yeah, inside your blood, and then Naruto touched the gold necklace at his throat. Valifor. The cloud reached his skin. The cloud entered his pores. The cloud distributed itself through his bloodstream in the 7 seconds it took to circulate. And Deidara watched with a hand already raised in the seal that would trigger the detonation. And his grin was the grin of a man who had decided, half a year ago, that this kid was going to end his life with the same art he had used to end 40 other lives. Deidara made the seal. The clay particles in Naruto's bloodstream received the command to detonate. The molecules in those particles attempted to move. The molecules in those particles encountered the field of Valifor stagnation that Naruto had laid down through the whole of his blood the moment the cloud touched his skin. The molecules in those particles could not. Stagnation does not negotiate with chemistry. Deidara's grin faltered. The C4 cloud inside Naruto's blood hung in his veins like 1,000 seeds that had been ordered to germinate inside a stone. They simply held there. Naruto opened his right hand. The Amon fire bloomed across his palm. He raised the hand toward the sky. Your art is beautiful, Deidara. It just has the wrong audience. He touched the hilt of the scimitar at his hip. Bell! The lightning came up through his blood from the inside. It found the C4 particles in their stagnant suspension and consumed them in a single coordinated firing of every molecule simultaneously. The Amon fire on his palm flared outward into the air and met the sky around him. The combined effect was a column of blue and gold light that erupted out of Naruto's body in a vertical pillar 100 meters high, with the C4 particles burning off in tiny white sparks inside the column at every point along its height. Naruto stood at the base of the pillar with his hair lifting in the static, and the pillar dispersed in the upper air, and the C4 was gone. Deidara stared. He had 3 seconds to stare. In the 4th second, the lightning from the column that had failed to disperse found him at 1,000 feet through Bale's hunger for height, and it crawled up the leg of his clay bird and into his body, and he convulsed once and fell off the bird with his hair smoking. He landed in a field 200 meters from the crater. He did not rise immediately. He stood up eventually, because Deidara was difficult to kill on the first try. But by the time he was standing, the situation in the field had changed. Sasori had arrived. The puppeteer came out of the tree line at the eastern edge of the field with his cloak around him and his Hiroko shell at the front of his body. The third Kazekage puppet was in his right hand. The 200 puppets of his hidden compartment were unfolding from his back in a fan that turned the field around him into a small army of sculpted death. "Deidara is being indulgent," said Sasori. His voice came from inside the Hiruko shell, where the human core of him sat in a small chamber that had not seen daylight in 22 years. "I will finish this." "Sasori." Naruto turned to face him across the field. "I read your case file last week. Your grandmother is still alive. She thinks you are dead. She has been making the puppet you slept with as a child every spring on the anniversary of your disappearance, and she lights a candle in front of it. I want you to know that. I want you to know it before what happens next." Sasori said nothing. The Hiruko shell rotated. The third Kazekage puppet rose from his hand. The iron sand came up out of the puppet in a black wave. It rose to the height of 3 men and shaped itself into 1,000 needles, and the needles oriented toward Naruto across the field and waited for the order. Sasori's 200 lesser puppets unfolded their limbs and their blades and their poison-tipped joints and stepped forward in formation. Naruto touched the index ring on his right hand. Vipar. The sky above him filled with metal. Every loose blade in a 5-kilometer radius, every kunai, every sword on a farmer's wall, every plowshare, every stray senbon that had been dropped in the dirt by a chunin 3 weeks ago and forgotten, answered the magnetic call and rose into the air over the field. Within 4 seconds, the sky above Naruto contained roughly 6,000 pieces of edged metal, suspended at a height of 50 meters, oriented downward. He brought his hand down in a single motion. The 1,000-sword shower fell. The blades came down at terminal velocity, accelerated further by Vipar's magnetic field, and they fell in a cone whose footprint was the exact area Sasori's puppet army occupied. They hit the puppets at force sufficient to pin them to the ground. The chakra threads connecting Sasori's hands to his puppets, the strings on which the whole technique depended, were sliced across at hundreds of points by the falling blades, and the puppets dropped like cut marionettes. The 200 became inert lumber inside 3 seconds. The third Kazekage's iron sand, which had been a wave of needles a moment before, was knocked off its axis by the falling blades and lost cohesion and fell to the ground in a black dune. Sasori's Hiruko shell was punctured in 70 places by the falling blades and ceased to function as armor. Naruto walked across the field. He touched the bracelet on his left arm. Crowshell. The animalistic form of Crowshell wrapped him in a moving sheath of fireballs that orbited his shoulders and his hips and his ankles in patterns the eye could not quite hold. He ran. He ran the distance between himself and Sasori in 2 seconds, and the fireballs ran with him. And at the moment of contact, he combined Crowshell's fire with the Amon fire on his right palm in a stream that he aimed at the iron sand on the ground. The iron, which had been resistant to the Crowshell fire on its own, was overwhelmed by the Amon fire's particular hunger for matter. The iron sand turned to glass in a wave that swept across the field, and then the glass turned to vapor, and Sasori was standing in a haze of vaporized metal with no weapons and no army, and the Hiruko shell falling off him in pieces. He cast it aside and stood revealed. His true puppet body. The boy-faced doll with the wooden joints and the chest cavity that held the only living part of him, his own heart, sustained in a small chamber by a thread of his original chakra, the last organic thing about him. Naruto stopped 3 paces away. He let the Crowshell form recede. The fireballs slowed and faded. The Amon fire on his palm dimmed to a glow. He looked at the puppet body. He looked at the chest cavity. He looked at the small red beating thing inside it. You built a body that can't feel anything, Sasori, and you call that art. What you made is a coffin, and you got in it yourself. Sasori opened the puppet's mouth. He had a kunai concealed in the wooden tongue. He fired it. Naruto caught the kunai with his left hand. He stepped forward. He set his right palm against Sasori's chest cavity. The Amon fire bloomed there once. The heart in the cavity stopped. Sasori's puppet body sank to its knees in the slow descent of a marionette whose strings have all been cut. The boy face tilted upward toward Naruto's face. The eyes, which had been painted on, somehow held an expression. Sasori said. I know, Sasori. Go to your grandmother. She has been waiting. Sasori's puppet body fell forward into the vaporized glass of the field. The light went out of the painted eyes. Naruto stood over the body for a moment. He turned. Deidara was still in the field at 200 meters, on one knee, having watched the whole of the Sasori encounter while trying to make his hand stop shaking long enough to mold a final piece of clay. He never finished the molding. Naruto crossed the field to him in 7 strides, knelt in front of him, took the unfinished clay from his hand, and crushed it in his fist. Deidara. You? Yeah. Tell me your message and I will let you go. What? You came here with a message from your leader. He sent 2 of you because he wanted a result, but he also wanted me to hear something. I want to hear it before you leave. Speak. Deidara stared at him. He had been ready to die. He had failed to prepare for being asked his lines. Pain says the world will pay back its pain. Pain says, pain is what makes, yes. I know the speech. Did he say anything to me personally? He said you don't understand. He said you've never lost anything. He said when you've lost what he's lost, you'll understand. Thank you, Deidara. Naruto rose. Go back to him. Tell him I have lost more than he has. I have lost a mother and a father and a childhood. I have lost the village that was supposed to raise me, and I have rebuilt it on my own. Tell him I understand exactly what he is, and tell him that what he should be doing with his pain is what I have done with mine. He has 30 more days. Go. Deidara went. He pulled himself onto a small clay bird that had been hiding in his sleeve. He limped into the air with one of his arms hanging and his hair scorched. He looked back once. Naruto was already walking back to the road. The message Naruto sent to the rest of the Akatsuki through his network arrived in 3 different Akatsuki safe houses in 4 different countries before Deidara had finished bleeding through his bandages on the bird. The message was 2 words: send more. The Akatsuki sent more. The Akatsuki sent Hidan and Kakuzu 6 weeks later, and the encounter lasted 30 minutes. Naruto buried Kakuzu's 5 hearts under 5 separate stagnation domes that nothing inside them could escape, and he handed Hidan to the Nara clan for sealing in the deep grave they had been preparing for him for a decade. The Akatsuki sent Kasame on a solo mission 2 months after that, and Kasame fought Naruto for a quarter of an hour, and then sat down on a rock and refused to fight any further, and the conversation that followed ended with Samahata eating its own master's chakra at Naruto's request, and Kasame walking unarmed into the land of water with a letter of recommendation to a man in Kirigakure who Naruto thought he might like to meet. By the time Naruto was 16 and 4 months, the Akatsuki had been reduced to 3 names: Pain, Konan, Itachi. He went to Kumogakure that summer. He had business there with the Raikage, a formal treaty extension, and a discussion of joint patrols on the northern coast. And he had business there with a man named Killer B, who had been a name in his head since he was 12. B was in the street outside the Raikage's tower. He was leaning on a pillar with a piece of paper in one hand and a pencil in the other. He looked up as Naruto came down the street. He looked Naruto up and down. He grinned. Yo, 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 the king of the sea, walking up in here looking free, gold on the wrist and the sword on the hip. My man Naruto took a dragon's trip. The rap was bad. The rap was so bad that the Raikage's secretary, who was waiting in the doorway to greet Naruto, put a hand over her mouth and turned away to keep her face. The rap kept going. There were 6 more lines. There was a reference to a dungeon that failed to rhyme with anything else. There was a flourish at the end where B pointed both index fingers at Naruto and made a sound with his mouth that was supposed to be a beat and was, in fact, a slow exhale. Naruto listened to the whole thing. He stood 3 meters away with his hands loose at his sides and his head tilted, and he let it land on him as it was. When it was over, he was silent for 2 seconds. That was the worst thing I've ever heard. Do it again. B stopped. B stared. B grinned so wide his sunglasses lifted on his cheeks. My man. He did it again. He did it longer. He added 2 more verses. The secretary fled into the tower. The Raikage, who had come out onto the balcony above to greet his foreign visitor, lowered his face into his hands and laughed for the first time in a year. Naruto and B became friends in the span of 1 rap. The formal meetings took 3 days. The treaty was signed. The patrol agreement was ratified. On the 4th day, B took Naruto to a waterfall in the mountains north of Kumo, where the air was thin and the spray was cold, and the rocks at the base of the falls had been polished smooth by 10,000 years of falling water. They sat on the polished rocks. B took his glasses off and looked at him for the first time without performing. Naruto. B. Your fox been talking to you yet? He has. What's he saying? He's saying he wants to. He has not decided how much. He has been at the door for a year, but he keeps the door closed. I think he doesn't know how to open it. He has been on the wrong side of doors his whole life. B nodded. He picked up a small flat stone from the rocks at his feet and rolled it across his knuckles. My 8 ain't talking to me at first. Took us 2 years. The whole 2 years I'm thinking he's the problem. The whole 2 years he's thinking I'm the problem. Then I just sat down one day and I said, brother, you and me been in the same body for 30 years. We are tired of fighting. We agreed it was past time. He came out. I came in. We've been talking ever since. What did you say to him at the start of the conversation, B? I asked him his name. Nobody ever asked him his name, Naruto. His real one. The one his mother gave him before they made him a number. So I asked. He told me. And after that, we was fine. Naruto looked out at the falls. The spray reached his face. He licked it off his lips. B, I want to try. I know you do, man. That's why I brought you up here. The fall makes the noise quiet. Helps the mind get loose. Sit down. Let go of the world for a while. I'll be here. I'm going to rap a little. Don't worry about it. Just let me do me. Naruto sat. He folded his legs. He let his hands rest on his knees with the palms up. He closed his eyes. B started to rap. The rap was against all expectations, soft. It was for himself, for the air, for the rocks, for the falls. It was a working rap, the kind a man does when he's keeping his hands busy and his mind in the room. The words were bad. The rhythm was good. The rhythm was the kind of rhythm a heart could borrow when its own had gotten lost. Naruto borrowed it. He went inside. The mindscape opened to him the way it always did, but this time he stayed. He had been there before. He had visited briefly 6 times in the last year. He had never stayed long enough to look around. He looked around now. It was no sewer. It had never been a sewer. The mindscape of Naruto Uzumaki at 16 years and 4 months was a dungeon. The architecture of the first dungeon he had ever conquered. The chamber of blue stone at the top of 1,000 stairs where he had met Ball, written out at city scale. There were corridors of jade running off in every direction. There were rivers of mercury flowing along the bases of the walls. There were obsidian forests through high arches. There was sky overhead, a constructed sky, painted with stars that he half remembered from various nights on the road. The Rook moved through the air in this place, the way air moves in a normal place, present everywhere, audible if you listened, white and warm and impossibly numerous. The seal was at the center. It was a structure now. In the years he had been carrying it, it had become a building, a small, bright temple of golden light with the kanji of the 4-symbol seal etched on every surface, and a great gate at its front, and behind the gate the largest chamber the mindscape contained. Naruto walked across the open space to the gate. He set his hand on it. The gate opened. He stepped through. Kurama was on the other side. The fox was lying down with his head on his forepaws, with his 9 tails arranged behind him in a fan that took up the entire visible field. He had been waiting. He looked up when Naruto entered, and his eyes, which were the size of small lakes, narrowed. You finally came in to sit then? I did. Why now? Because you wanted me to. I have been waiting for you to be ready to ask. You have been close to ready for 2 years. I came in today because B told me his fox needed to be asked his name. I am asking it. My name. Yes. Kurama was silent for a long time. The chamber filled with his silence. The Rook that ran through the mindscape held still around them and waited. Kurama. Kurama. Thank you. My name is Naruto. I think you already know that one. I would like to be in your company for a while. I would like to fight you, because I think we both have something we need to take out on each other before we can put it down. I would like to do this without hurting you, and I will accept that you cannot offer me the same. You think you can stand against me, boy. I know I cannot stand against all of you. I know I can stand against enough of you that the fight will be honest. That is what I am here for. Kurama rose. He rose to his full height, which was a height the chamber barely held, and he opened his mouth and roared. And the roar shook the temple and the gate and the corridors and the rivers and the sky, and the rook that had been hanging in the air around Naruto pressed itself to his skin in a layer like armor. The fight inside Naruto's mind began. He let it be a fight. He came at Kurama with everything. Bale's lightning bright as the chamber could hold, Crochel's fire painting the air in arcs that should not have been possible inside a mindscape but were because the mindscape was his and it answered his expectations. Kurama met him with a wall of red chakra that turned each blow into a heat that left burns across Naruto's robes and the skin under them. They tore at each other for what felt, inside the dilated time of the mind, like several hours. Naruto bled. Kurama bled. The temple at the center of the chamber cracked in two places. The rook in the air refused to panic. It watched. It had been waiting a long time for this fight to happen. When they paused at last, they paused together. Kurama was on his haunches with his ribs heaving. Naruto was on one knee with his sword across his thighs and his right palm pressed to a long burn on his stomach. They looked at each other across the chamber. "You are stronger than I expected, boy." "You are kinder than I expected, Fox." Kurama bared his teeth. "Take that back." "I will take it back when you have given me one reason to," Kurama growled. The growl led nowhere. Then the chains came. They came up through the floor of the chamber. There were 5 of them, long, glittering, the chains of the Uzumaki, made of the chakra of a woman who had died 12 years ago with a baby on her chest and a seal in her belly, and a husband sealing himself away beside her. The chains wrapped Kurama gently. They had been wrapping him gently for 16 years. They had been holding him at half power the whole time, and the holding had been the holding of a hand laid on a forehead, instead of the holding of an enemy. The chains tightened. They tightened until they were a shape. The shape was a woman. She stepped out of the chains as if stepping out of a long coat. She was tall. Her hair was red. It was as red as the chamber had been before they fought, redder, the kind of red that made the eye look twice to be sure. She wore a green dress with a white apron over it. Her hands were already on her face. She was already crying before she had finished becoming solid, before she had taken her first step. Naruto. Naruto stood up from his knee. He had been on the field with 7 Djinn for years. He had faced down Sannin and missing Nin and S-rank criminals. He had fought a tailed beast in the sky over his village. He had crossed deserts at 10. He had nothing in him for this, Mom. It hung in the air alone for a long moment. The chamber held it. Kurama held it. The rook held it. Even the temple at the center of the mindscape cracked from the fight seemed to hold it. She crossed the floor of the chamber. She crossed it fast. She got her hands on his face and his shoulders and his arms, and she said his name 3 more times, like she had been saving it up for 16 years and could not spend it fast enough. And Naruto Uzumaki, who had stood up to a Sannin's killing intent at 12, found that his legs were going to give and that he was going to let them. She caught him. They sat down on the floor of the chamber together. The chains lay in coils around them like a moat. Kurama, who had drawn back, watched from across the room with his ears flattened and his tails very still. Mom. I'm here, baby. I'm here. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there, baby. I'm so sorry. It's okay. It's not. Mom, it's okay. I built a life out of what I had. I built it good. I want you to see it. I want you to look at me. She looked at him. She looked at her son with the look of a woman who had been watching him through a seal for 16 years and could see everything and touch nothing. Her hands moved over his face the way the hands of a blind woman move over a thing she has loved without seeing. She traced his jaw. She found the small scar on his chin from the fall he had taken at 6. She found the line at the corner of his eye that she had failed to see coming. She found his hair, longer than she had pictured it from the inside of a seal, and she pulled the strand in her fingers and laughed wet through her tears. My boy, I'm yours. She told him about the night he was born. She told him longer than the version Jiraiya had told him on the road. She told him about the way her water had broken in the special chamber under the Hokage mountain, about how the Anbu had run the room, about the way Minato had been holding her hand and telling her about the names he had been considering. Naruto was not the first, she said. Naruto was the third. The first two had been her father's name and Minato's own teacher's name, and she had vetoed both. And Minato had laughed and said, "All right. What about Naruto?" Because Naruto was the name of a character in one of Jiraiya's books, and the character had been a boy who refused to give up on the world. She told him she had agreed because she had wanted her son to refuse to give up on the world. She told him she had failed to anticipate that the world would test him quite that much. She told him about the fox attack. She told him about the masked man, Obito, though she had not known his name then, and the way he had ripped Kurama out of her seal and used him against the village. She told him about Minato's choice. She told him that Minato had said, in the seconds before the sealing, "I believe in his soul more than I believe in any seal." She told him that she had believed in his soul too. She told him she had spent 16 years from inside the seal saying the same 3 words over and over again to the boy who could not hear her, and the 3 words had been "let him be okay," and the words had been a prayer and a promise and a curse and a love all at once. He listened. He listened the way he listened to Hinata on the roof, with the whole of himself, with his eyes on her face, with no part of him wandering. When she ran down at last, he kissed her forehead, and he set his hand on her cheek, and he told her he was okay. He told her he had built a household. He told her he had learned to be looked at. He told her he had found his way to a life that he had wanted, and that he was building a world in which other children would never have to wait outside dungeons for someone to love them. He told her, slowly, in his own voice, what he had become. She listened. Her hand on his face never moved while he spoke. When he was done, she pulled him into her arms, and she held him for a long time. The rook around them was doing something Naruto had never seen it do before. It was settling. It was settling the way water settles when a long agitation has stopped. The temple at the center of the chamber was knitting itself back together, the cracks closing along their seams, the golden light brightening. Kushina pulled back. She wiped her cheeks. She turned her head and looked across the chamber at the fox. Kurama. The fox flinched. He had not been called by his name by a human voice in 12 years. The last voice had been hers. Kushina. "Come here, you ridiculous animal." Kurama came across the chamber on all fours, with his head lowered, the way a great dog comes when called by the one person it has chosen out of the world to obey. He stopped 3 paces from her. She rose. She walked up to him, and she put both of her hands on his enormous nose, and she pressed her forehead to the bridge of his snout, and she said something to him that Naruto could not quite hear, but that he understood from the shape of it. She was thanking him. She was thanking him for carrying her son. She was thanking him for failing to break the boy when she had not been there to ask him not to. She was thanking him for staying inside the seal when he could have torn the seal apart in his fury. She was apologizing to him for 16 years of being a prisoner. She was apologizing to him for the entire history of his enslavement to her clan. She was apologizing for everything that had been done to him in the name of villages that should have asked him his name and never had. Kurama lowered his head until it touched the floor of the chamber. She stood for a moment with her hand on the bridge of his snout. Then she stepped back. She turned to her son, Naruto. "Yes. Make the offer." He nodded. He stood. He crossed the chamber. He stopped in front of Kurama with his hand extended palm up. "You and I have been feared by the same world for the same reason, Fox. That makes us the same thing, and I have never once left a part of myself behind." Kurama looked at the hand. He looked at the boy. He looked at the woman who had been his second vessel and who was somehow in this room. He looked at the rook in the air around them, which had arranged itself into a slow spiral over the place where Naruto's palm hung in space. He pressed his nose to the palm. The seal opened. It opened in agreement instead of force. The gate of the small bright temple at the center of the chamber swung wide and stayed wide. The chakra inside it, Kurama's chakra, vast beyond any container that had ever held it, the chakra of a being older than the elemental nations, flowed out through the gate and through Naruto and through the corridors of jade and the rivers of mercury and the obsidian forests and it braided itself with the rook that already filled the chamber, and the two energies became something neither of them had been alone. Naruto stood at the center of it with his hand on the fox's nose, and his eyes were closed, and he was crying without sound, and his mother was beside him with her hands folded at her chest, watching. When he came back to himself, outside the mindscape, when his eyes opened on the polished rocks at the base of the falls in Kumogakure, the air around him was glowing. B had stopped rapping. He was sitting cross-legged across from Naruto on the rocks with his sunglasses pushed up onto his forehead, and his eyes were wide and he was grinning. "My man," he said. "My man. You did it. I see it. I see it on you. Look at you, brother. You came back lit up like a sunset, and I'm gonna write you a rap about it, and you're gonna hate it, and you're gonna love it, and that's how you're gonna know your family." He did the rap. It was the worst one yet. It was full of bad rhymes and worse jokes and a chorus that involved making fox noises with his mouth. Naruto laughed for the first time in months. He laughed until his sides hurt. He laughed the way he had laughed when he was 10, and the road was open and the world had yet to start testing him properly. B, when the laughing was done, put his sunglasses back on his face. He stood. He offered Naruto his hand. "Come on, brother. We got a war to lose some friends in. Best be ready." Naruto took his hand. They walked back down the mountain together. The message came 3 weeks later. It came by Naruto's own network first, before any official channel could reach him. A trader in the land of rivers, who had been on his payroll for 2 years, had heard from a courier from the land of rain that a force of unknown size had been mustered in the city of Amegakure and was moving south toward the border of the land of fire. The trader had paid the courier well to keep his mouth shut, and the trader had passed the information up through Naruto's chain inside 6 hours. Pain had decided to make his answer. Naruto traveled back to Konoha as fast as his full collar equip could carry him. He arrived at the southern wall at noon on the day Pain's 6 bodies entered the village. The fight began before Naruto had cleared the gate. He saw it from the air. The Deva path was at the center of the village square, with the other 5 paths arrayed around the perimeter, and the village had already taken its first damage. A quarter of the western district was rubble. People were running in the streets. Tsunade was on the roof of the Hokage Tower, with her hair down, channeling Katsuyu's healing through 300 slug fragments into the wounded across the village. Kakashi was in the eastern district, holding off 2 of the paths with Sasuke, who had returned from his most recent training trip 3 months ago and had been pacing the village ever since. Waiting, Naruto landed in the square at 30 meters out from the Deva path. He did not speak first. He drew his sword. The Deva path turned. Nagato's voice came through the borrowed body in the slow, hollow way that the path spoke when their master was wearing them. "Naruto Uzumaki, we meet. Nagato, you know my name? I know more than your name. Then you know why I have come." "I do. You are wrong, Nagato. We will talk about why you are wrong in a few minutes. First, I am going to take 5 of your bodies away from you because they are doing harm in my village, and then we will speak." The Deva path raised its right hand. The Shinra Tensei built in the air around it. A pressure wave so large that the cobblestones in the square began to lift off the ground in the seconds before its release. Naruto met it with Baal's Bararok, fired at point-blank range. The 2 forces met 3 meters in front of him and produced a column of light and concussion that flattened every standing structure in a 50-meter radius around the square. And Naruto was the only thing in the column when the column had passed, and the Deva path was on its back 20 meters away with its chest open. He took the other 5 paths in the space of 7 minutes. He took the Ashura path in the eastern district with a single sword cut from above. Focalor wind under his feet, Baal lightning in the blade, the strike severing the path from its anchor before its mechanical arms could complete their rotation. He took the animal path through Zeppar's sound command. The technique that controlled the path's summons received an interfering signal at exactly the frequency of the summoning, and the summons turned on their summoner. He took the Preta path through Furfur's hunger for things that absorbed. Furfur's wings extended forward, and took the path's absorption field into themselves, and the path, deprived of its defining capability, fell to a single fireball from Crowshell. He took the human path in the northern district. He took the Naraka path on the steps of the Hokage Tower. He found Nagato in the ruins of a paper-wrapped tower 15 miles to the north. The animal path had been carrying Nagato's wheelchair on its back. Nagato was barely alive in the chair, his hair white at the roots, his body wasted to bone and tubes, his Rinnegan still active because the eyes outlived the body in his particular case. Konan was beside him. She had her wings open. She was prepared to fight to the end for a man who had been her brother since they were both orphans in a war their village had not started. Naruto stopped 20 meters away. Konan, stay where you are. I am where I am. I am going to ask Nagato a question, and then I'm going to go. I will refuse to harm him. I will refuse to harm you. Will you let me speak to him? Konan looked at the man in the chair. The man in the chair looked at Naruto across the room. You may speak, Nagato said. Naruto walked forward to the chair. He knelt in front of it. He looked up at the old man's face, the face of a man who had been 20 when his village burned and 46 now and dying. He spoke in a low voice. He spoke in the warm, direct register he used with Hinata on the roof. Nagato, what did you want the world to look like when you were my age? Nagato closed his eyes. He had been asked many questions in his life. He had been asked few that found him without an answer already prepared. The question that found him today did. I wanted, he said after a long pause, I wanted a village where my parents would have lived through breakfast. That is what I want too. You. I want it for every child in every village in the world, Nagato. I have been building it for 6 years. I would like you to come see what I have built. It is not finished. It will never be finished. But I would like to show it to you, and I would like Konan to be welcomed in it. And I would like the dream you and your brother and Jiraiya started in the rain to find a place to live where it is no longer dreaming. Will you come? Nagato looked at him. The Rinnegan in his eyes was the eye of the sage of 6 paths, the eye that had seen across times. The eye was looking at the boy in front of him and seeing what the boy was. The seeing was its own answer. I am dying, Naruto. I know. Take my eyes. I will not. They are useful. They will help you. Take them. I refuse. I will take your message instead. Konan will live and she will come with me, and we will build the world you wanted to build. Your eyes will stay in your head. Nagato, they are yours. They will go where you go. Nagato cried. He cried without sound, the way men cry who have been holding it back for 30 years. Konan, behind him, did the same. She had simply allowed what was already there to be visible. Nagato gave Naruto his life. He used the King of Hell technique, the path of revival, the one he had been holding back as a final card, and he poured the rest of his force into the bodies he had taken in Konoha, and he raised every person his paths had killed during the attack. He died in the chair as the last body got up out of its grave. He died with his hand on Naruto's hand. He died easier than he had lived. Konan came back to Konoha with Naruto. She brought a paper crane in her sleeve, and a book her brother had written, and the address of every Akatsuki safe house in the world. The 5 Kage Summit was called the next month. It was held in the Land of Iron, in the snow-walled fortress of the samurai. The 5 Kage sat at a curved table. Tsunade was at the center seat. Gaara was to her left. The Raikage was to her right. The Mizukage, a young woman named Mei Terumi, who had taken the hat the previous year, sat beside Gaara. The Tsuchikage Onoki sat beside the Raikage, with his arms crossed and his small frame hunched and his eyes narrow. Naruto entered the chamber alone. He had no chair. The chair had been left empty for him at the foot of the curve, the position of an applicant, the chair of someone making a case. He did not sit. He walked to the center of the floor, stopped 3 paces in front of the Kage, and inclined his head. Kage of the 5 villages, thank you for hearing me. Mei Terumi smiled. The Raikage grunted. Gaara had nothing left to do. He had already done it. Tsunade was watching with the careful watchfulness of a woman who knew this presentation was going to win in her room and was waiting to see how easily it would win in the other ones. Onoki spoke first. You have been calling yourself a king, Uzumaki. I have, Tsuchikage. Explain. I am building an alliance, Tsuchikage. The alliance has 6 member countries currently, none of them shinobi villages. The alliance shares trade routes, intelligence, and a treaty of mutual defense. The alliance has, to date, been responsible for ending 2 slave economies on the southern continents, reducing piracy in the eastern sea lanes by 60%, and shipping medicines into 3 poor countries at cost. I call it a kingdom because the word is more honest than alliance. I rule it because the people in it asked me to, and I accepted. I would like the shinobi villages to be part of it, not as subjects, as partners. 5 seats at a table the size of the world. Onoki was silent for a long time. The other Kage were silent with him. The chamber doors blew off their hinges. Obito Uchiha walked in. He was alone. He was wearing the orange mask he had been wearing for 15 years. He carried no weapon in his hands. He walked across the floor with the slow, easy stride of a man who had decided in advance that nothing in this room could stop him and was here to make the room aware of it. The samurai guards moved. Onoki raised a hand and stopped them. Obito stopped at the center of the floor, 3 paces from Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. Obito Uchiha. Onoki's eyes narrowed at the name. I am declaring the Eye of the Moon plan, Obito said. His voice was flat and emptied of feeling, because he had practiced removing every inflection from it for years. I am going to revive the 10 tails. I am going to project the infinite Tsukuyomi onto the moon. I'm going to put every living mind in this world into a dream where the things that hurt them never happened. I am telling you this because I am no longer hiding. I am telling you because you should know what is coming. I am telling you because the boy you are listening to, he did not turn his head toward Naruto, thinks he can stop me, and he cannot. None of you can. The dream is coming. Resist or refuse to resist. Your resistance will inform the schedule. Naruto looked at him. The Kage looked at him. The room held its breath. Naruto stepped forward. He stopped within arm's reach of the masked man. Obito, speak quickly. I've heard this plan before. Men who gave up on the world always want to dream it instead of fix it. You're going to come back to the real one, Obito. You're going to choose it. I'll leave the door open until you do. Obito was silent for 1 beat. The lone visible Sharingan in his mask flickered. Then he laughed. A short laugh, 1 syllable, the laugh of a man who had failed to anticipate being talked to like that and had no protocol for the response. You are interesting, Uzumaki. I will give you that. He turned and walked out. The doors that had been blown off the hinges reassembled in the air behind him as he passed through the doorframe, the wood swirling back together in the slow draw of his space-time technique. The doors settled shut. Tsunade stood up. The 4th Shinobi War begins today, she said. Allied Shinobi Forces, Joint Command. I propose Naruto Uzumaki and the Raikage's brother Killer Bee as the operational center of the strike force. I propose myself, Gaara, and the Raikage as the operational center of the defensive structure. I propose Onoki and Mei in joint command of the air and amphibious assets. I propose the kingdom's intelligence network be integrated with our own. Vote. The vote was 5-0. The war began the next morning. The allied shinobi forces gathered on a plain at the eastern edge of the Land of Lightning, 90,000 strong, the largest single shinobi force in recorded history. Naruto walked among them in his gold robes with his sword at his hip and his 7 pieces of jewelry warm with low Magoi flow, and his presence among the troops did something the Allied command had been hoping for and had been unable to guarantee. It settled them. He was visible. He was warm. He spoke to the captains of squads as he passed them. He remembered the names of Jonin he had met once at a treaty signing 2 years ago. He found a Chunin from Wave at the edge of a Konoha squad and stopped to ask him about his sister, a general, a man from Iwa, an old commander who had served under Onoki for 3 decades, found Naruto at the front of the formation as the dawn broke. Uzumaki Dono, General, we are recommending a defensive formation. The enemy outnumbers us at points. The reanimated Kage are on the field. Naruto looked east, where the dust of the enemy army was beginning to lift on the horizon. He turned his head and looked at the general, who was 68 years old and had survived 3 wars, found that his throat was dry. I didn't come to this world to survive it. I came to fix it. Naruto said it once, in the warm, direct voice he had used to ask Nagato about his parents. He said it, and then he began to walk forward, alone, across the front of the formation, toward the dust on the horizon. The allied forces behind him held still for 1 second. Then they followed. 90,000 shinobi walked forward across an open plain at dawn, behind a 16-year-old boy in pale gold silk, and the dust on the horizon resolved into an army of the dead, and the fourth shinobi war was joined. The first day of the war was Edo Tensei. Kabuto had been busy. He had reanimated everyone of importance who had died in the last 100 years, and the field that opened in front of the allied forces was a field of names. Hanzo of the Salamander, the previous Mizukage, the second Tsuchikage, a dozen Akatsuki members the Akatsuki itself had killed, hundreds of Jonin and Anbu and missing nin who had been wars worth of headlines in their day. Naruto and B took the center. B was in his 8 tails partial form. The ink-black chakra of Juki shrouded him from shoulder to ankle. He was twirling his 7 swords in a configuration he had invented for the war that involved holding 3 with his teeth, and he was rapping under his breath. And his rap was an accompaniment to the rhythm of his strikes. And the rhythm of his strikes was killing reanimated Jonin at a rate of 4 per second. Naruto walked beside him. He used Zappar's sound, layered with Naruto's understanding of seal theory. The seal theory Kushina had whispered to him through the wall of the seal in the year after their Mindscape meeting, produced a frequency that interfered with the Edo Tensei binding from the inside. Naruto did not break the technique. He broke the bond between the technique and its subjects instead. Reanimated shinobi across the front line of the enemy army, straightened, blinked, looked at their own hands, looked up at the boy in gold silk who had given them back their selves, and walked off the field. They returned to their graves with the slow, grateful walk of people who had been waiting a long time to lie down again. Kabuto, from his cave 100 miles away, screamed. The first reanimated Kage entered the field at noon. The second Mizukage walked across the plain with his clamshell summon hanging in the air over his shoulder. He recognized Mei Terumi across the line, his own successor twice removed, the kunoichi who had inherited a village whose foundations he had cracked, and he sent the clamshell's infinite mirage at her, the technique that had made him impossible to kill in his original life. Naruto stepped in front of Mei. He touched the silver necklace at his throat. Furfur. The dark wings sprouted from his back. Furfur ate genjutsu the way Furfur ate barriers. It ate things that were constructions of intent. The clamshell's mirage entered the dark wings and was consumed in the time it took to cast. The second Mizukage's primary capability ceased to be a capability on the field for the rest of the day. Naruto took his head off with a single swing of his scimitar, and Mei behind him made a small sound he chose to pretend he had failed to hear. By the end of the first day, Naruto and B had broken 3 Edo Tensei waves and killed 4 reanimated Kage. The allied forces, who had been ready to lose a third of their numbers in the first engagement, lost less than 4,000. The wounded count was higher. Tsunade's slugs were working through them in the rear lines. On the second day, the 10 Tails was summoned. Madara had arrived on the field by then. He stood at the front of the enemy host in his white robes, with his hair down to his lower back, and his Rinnegan rotating slowly in his eye sockets. And he watched the allied forces from across 2 kilometers of open plain, with the bored attention of a man who had been awake for a long time and could see exactly how this was going to end. Obito stood beside him. Their work was nearly finished. The Gedo statue had been growing in the air above them for 6 hours, and the 8-tailed beasts they had collected over 15 years were boiling inside it. The 10 tails coalesced at noon. It rose to a height of 300 meters in 20 seconds. Its body was the color of dried mud. Its single eye opened. Its 10 tails fanned out behind it. The allied forces, looking up at it, made the sound that 90,000 people make when 90,000 people understand what they are looking at. The 10 tails began to charge a tailed beast bomb. The bomb formed in its mouth in a sphere the size of a small mountain. The ground in front of it began to crack from the gravitational draw of the bomb's formation. Pebbles lifted into the air. The sun darkened in a circle a kilometer across. B, beside Naruto, looked at the bomb. He looked at his friend. "Brother, we falling back?" A king does not retreat. He decides which direction forward leads. Naruto walked forward toward the Ten Tails. B laughed once. He swung his swords up onto his shoulders. He followed. What happened next is recorded in the war chronicles of 3 different countries, and the eyewitness accounts of 7 different jonin who survived to give them. The accounts vary in the small details. They agree on the structure. Naruto and Kurama synchronized for the first time on a battlefield. The synchronization happened in 3 stages. The first stage was the chakra cloak, golden red, extending from Naruto's body outward in a layer of fire-shaped, tailed beast chakra that had never been seen at this level in the world's recorded history. The second stage was the partial tailed beast mode. Naruto's silhouette deepening into the shape of a man who was also a fox, a humanoid figure with a fox's silhouette layered over it in living chakra, with the 9 tails extending behind him like a banner. The third stage was the alignment of the Djinn with the cloak, each of the 7 jewels lighting in a different color along the chakra layer, and the layer rearranging itself around their inputs to make space for them. The allied forces watching from behind stopped fighting. The enemy forces in front stopped fighting. The Ten Tails, in the middle of its bomb charge, paused for 1 full second to look at what was approaching it. Naruto walked toward the Ten Tails with his sword in his right hand, and his left hand extended toward the bomb in the beast's mouth. "B, stay back. I am going to do something I have been saving." "My man, do it." Naruto raised the sword. He spoke the words he had spoken in the arena over Konoha 4 years ago. He spoke them with more weight because he had 4 more years of Magoi behind them and a fox at his side in a war that needed an answer. Bararok Inkurad Saika. The lightning sword of extinction came down. This time it was 3. He fired 3 of them in unison from 3 different angles, each one twice as large as the one he had used in Konoha. The allied forces, who had been at the edge of the bomb's gravitational draw, were now in the path of the lightning's discharge, and Naruto extended Faller's wind around the strike to push the discharge outward away from his own people. The 3 swords of lightning met the Ten Tails bomb at the apex of its formation. The bomb destabilized. The bomb collapsed inward on itself in the throat of the Ten Tails. The Ten Tails swallowed its own bomb because it had no other option, and the bomb detonated inside its body, and the Ten Tails sat down on the plain with a wound across its chest that ran from shoulder to hip. The allied forces roared. Madara, on the field, lifted his head. He had been watching the boy through the Rinnegan since the moment Naruto entered the field, and he had been adjusting his estimate every 20 minutes, and the estimate had now reached a number he had not used in a very long time. He moved. He moved across the plain at speeds that the Sharingan eyes around him could not track. He came at Naruto from the left side, with his fan in his left hand, and his katana in his right, and his Susanoo forming around him as he ran, the lavender skeleton swelling into a full armored construct by the 3rd stride. The allied forces in his path got out of his path. The ones who could not get out were knocked off their feet by the wind of his passage. Naruto turned. He met Madara's first strike with his sword. The 2 blades met, and the impact crater that formed under both of them was 3 meters deep. The fight between Naruto and Madara on the 2nd day of the 4th Shinobi War lasted 41 minutes. Survivors of the war would describe it for the rest of their lives. Hashirama Senju, watching from the front line of the reanimated dead, would press one hand to his chest and refuse to move it for the entire duration. Madara used the Susanoo. Naruto matched it with Crochelle. The lavender construct's blade and the orbiting fireballs met across the plain in 1,000 strikes that left the ground glassed in spiraling patterns. Madara used the limbo shadows, invisible bodies of himself, projected from the Rinnegan into adjacent dimensions, attacking from angles no eye could see. Naruto used Valiforce stagnation laid down across the air in a 30-meter radius around his body, and the limbo shadows entered the radius and froze in place. He used Bale's lightning to conduct through the frozen limbo shadows and back into Madara's body through the dimensional thread that connected them. And Madara felt his own attacks for the first time in his long career. And the experience was novel enough that he stepped back. The combination of Djinn that Naruto used at the climax of the engagement was one he had been working on in private for 2 years. Valifor laid down. Bale threaded through it. Focalor as a directional layer. He fired the combined technique from the tip of his sword in a beam that was lightning conducted through stagnated air, directed by wind 3 meters wide, the color of a thunderstorm seen from inside a glacier. It crossed the plain. It struck Madara in the chest. The Susanoo around Madara cracked. The cracks ran. The lavender construct came apart into fragments that fell across a half-kilometer area, and Madara fell with them. And he landed on his back on the plain with a hole through his chest that the Rinnegan kept patching at the edges, and which the technique kept reopening because the technique was still active in the wound. Madara, on his back, laughed. It was a horse laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had been laughed at for a very long time and was now, against expectation, laughing himself. You are genuinely interesting, for the first time in a long time. Naruto stopped above him. He held off another strike. He looked down with the warm, direct attention he gave Hinata on the roof. Madara, I would have liked to know you when you were young. I think we would have had things to say to each other. You are 16, boy. I am, Madara. I am also exactly old enough to know what I just said. Tell me something. When you were my age, before Hashirama, before Izuna, what did you want? Madara closed his eyes. The Rinnegan went dark for 1 second. I wanted a world where my brothers did not die at the rate they were dying. I wanted to walk through a field at dawn with no funerals waiting at the end of it. I want that too, Madara. The difference is that I'm going to walk through the field. You are going to stay on it. Sleep. Naruto raised his hand. He set it on Madara's forehead. He spoke the words for Zippar. He sent a single sound command into the man's spinal column at the frequency that put complex neural activity to sleep. Madara's Rinnegan flickered. His body went still. He was not dead. He had been put down, the way a master puts down a fighting dog that had been bred for a life it could never have had. Obito came across the plain. He had been watching the fight. He had been watching it from 20 meters away. He had stood there motionless during the 41 minutes, and now he was the only thing moving on the field. He stopped in front of Naruto with his orange mask still on and his hands at his sides. You put him down. I did. He is the oldest fighter in the world. He was. Take off the mask, Obito. Obito stood for 10 seconds. He raised his hands. He lifted the mask off his face. His face was scarred. His face was older than its years. The lone Sharingan in his right eye socket was old. He looked at Naruto with the eye that had been Kakashi's brother's eye, the eye of a boy who had died in a cave at 13 and was never allowed to rest. I want to see it, Obito said. What? What you said? Show me what you built. Naruto reached out. He put his hand on Obito's shoulder. He shared the rook with him. The rook that flowed around Naruto opened to Obito for a moment, and Obito saw, through the connection, the bridge and wave, the hospital wing in Konoha, the school for war orphans Naruto had funded in the land of Tea, the freed children of the southern slave halls grown up now and running shops and raising children of their own, Gaara as Kazekage sleeping through the night, Hinata on a roof with a cloth bundle in her hands, Kushina in a mindscape with both her hands on her son's face. Obito closed his eye. He opened it. He nodded once. I will help you with the 10 tails. I know you will. It is going to cost me. It is. I will be here when it does. The 10 tails was still on the field. It had risen from its wound. Its single eye was open. The wound across its chest was still smoking, but the beast did not need an unbroken body to function. It ran on chakra, and the chakra reserves were almost limitless. Obito walked toward it. He used his Kamui to step into the seal space where the 10-tailed chakra anchor was held. The anchor was a piece of Madara's will, projected into the beast at the moment of summoning. Obito found the anchor. He took hold of it. He removed it from the beast. The cost was his body. The Kamui at this depth, sustained for this duration, against a chakra structure this large, consumed him from the inside. He came out of the seal space with the anchor in his hand and his right arm gone from the shoulder and his face turning gray. He gave the anchor to Naruto. He sat down on the plain. He looked up at the boy in gold silk. Tell Kakashi, he said. Tell him I'm sorry I took so long. "I will, Obito." Obito smiled. It was a small smile, the smile of a boy who had been 13 once. He closed his eye. He died on the plane with his hand on Naruto's wrist. The 10 tails roared. It was still on the field. Its anchor had been removed, but it had been on the field long enough to develop a will of its own. Or, more accurately, a will that was no longer Madara's. The will that the 10 tails developed in the seconds after its anchor was removed was older than Madara, older than the elemental nations, older than the world. The will was Kaguya. The plane went cold. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 5 seconds. The 10 tails body collapsed inward on itself and reformed around a single point of light at its center, and the light brightened, and the light became a woman, and the woman stepped out of the collapsing body onto the plane. She wore white. Her hair was white. Her eyes were the third eye, the Sharingan, and the Byakugan, layered. She looked at the field. She looked at the allied forces. She looked at Naruto. She did not speak. She raised one hand. The air at Naruto's left side opened in a dimensional portal, a circle of black light, and a stream of acid, the volume of a small river, poured out of the portal toward the allied forces' eastern flank. Naruto raised his right hand. Furfur's wings opened across his back. The portal closed. The acid that had already come through fell into the wings and was consumed. He looked at Kaguya. He looked at his army. He looked at the sky over the field, which had been a battlefield sky for 2 days and which was about to become something else. Tsunade, Gaara, the Raikage, Onoki, pull the army back. 2 kilometers. I am about to do something the field cannot hold. Brother, B, pull them back. B pulled them back. The allied forces, who had been watching the boy in gold silk for 2 days, withdrew at his word the way armies withdraw at the word of a man they have decided to follow into anything. Naruto stood alone in front of Kaguya. He raised his sword. He spoke the words he had been saving since he had stood at the gate of the 7th dungeon at the age of 11 3/4. Djinn of Wrath and Heroes. Djinn of Ice and Heroes. Djinn of Sound and Heroes. Djinn of Darkness and Heroes. Djinn of Wind and Heroes. Djinn of Magnetism and Heroes. Djinn of Light and Heroes. Dwell in my body. The full 7 Djinn Equip happened. 2 horns curled up from his temples. Blue dragon scales raced across his right arm and shoulder and the right side of his torso. White fox energy braided across his left arm and the left side of his torso in the pattern of Valifor's animal form. A third eye opened on his forehead and resonated at a frequency that made the air around him hum. Dark wings spread from his back and stayed open. Dark feathers ran up his legs alongside the scales. A magnetic field pulled metal from across the plane into a slow orbit around his hips and shoulders. Fragments of broken blades, the buckles of fallen armor, the iron of the earth itself. Fireballs from Crochel began to circle his head in a halo. And layered over all of it, Kurama's chakra, the full chakra mode, golden red, a coat of living flame that wrapped the whole figure and gave it a silhouette visible from 20 miles in any direction. He was a single figure now containing 8 separate beings in formal cooperation, each of them lending their particular hunger to a body that had room for all of them. The allied forces, 2 kilometers back, dropped to their knees, some of them in awe. Some of them because their bodies refused to remain standing in the presence of what had been released onto the plane. Hashirama Senju, on the front line of the reanimated dead, pressed his hand over his mouth. Minato Namikaze, who had been on the field for 2 days as a reanimated soul fighting against his will under Kabuto's binding. Minato, who had been on the periphery of the previous fight without entering it because Kabuto had been holding his strings back for a critical moment, felt the Edo Tensei binding break on him as the binding broke on every reanimated shinobi in Kabuto's control across the field at the same instant. Kabuto, in his cave, had finally been found. Itachi Uchiha, who had spent the war alive and on Naruto's side, had reached the cave and ended Kabuto's binding with the Izanami. Minato stood up on the field. He was alive in his reanimated body for the first time in 12 years. He was on his feet. He looked around the field. He saw the allied forces 2 kilometers back. He saw Kaguya across the plain in white. He saw the figure in the center. The figure in the center had his hair. Minato Namikaze walked across the plain. He walked the kilometer between his place on the line and the figure in the center in 20 seconds, using a Hiraishin step he had not used in 12 years, and that was easier than he remembered it. He stopped 10 meters from the figure. The figure turned. The figure had his eyes. Naruto, in the full 7 Djinn Equip plus Kurama mode, looked at his father across 10 meters of broken plain. He took one step toward Minato. The plain cracked under his foot. "Dad, I've been keeping your village safe." 4 words. He said them, and then he was quiet. Minato Namikaze, who had been the 4th Hokage, who had sealed his own soul into his son 16 years ago, who had been a body without a self for 2 days under Kabuto's binding, and was now a self in a body that would not last the week, opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. He walked the last 10 meters to his son. He stopped within reach. He raised both his hands. He took his son's face between them. The Djinn form blazed around Minato's hands and did not burn him. The form had recognized the blood and made allowances for it. He looked at his son's face with the focus of a man who had a list of questions 16 years long and was discarding the list because the face in front of him was answering all of them at once. "My boy, I'm yours. Your robes. I had them made in the south. The 7 jewels, 7 Djinn. I conquered 7 dungeons. I will tell you about each one. We have time before the sealing technique falls off. You kept the village safe." "I did, Dad. The village is safe." Minato pulled his son into his arms. The full 7 Djinn Equip around Naruto receded by half to accommodate the embrace. The horns retracted. The magnetic field released its orbiting metal. The wings folded down. The chakra cloak from Kurama dimmed to a warm amber. Father and son held each other on a battlefield with the rabbit goddess across from them, and the battlefield was silent for the 8 seconds the embrace lasted. When they stepped apart, Minato looked over his son's shoulder at Kaguya. "Naruto, Dad, I would like to help you with this." "I was hoping you would say that." They turned together, father and son, the 4th Hokage and the king of the 7 seas. Naruto restored the full 7 Djinn Equip. He drew on Kurama all the way. Minato laid his hand on Naruto's shoulder, and the Hiraishin seal flickered open across his palm. The seal that connected Minato to every Hiraishin tag he had ever placed in the world, including the one he had placed on his own son's body at the moment of sealing him 16 years ago. "I have a tag on you, Naruto, from the seal. I know. I can move with you. I know, Dad. Let's go." They charged Kaguya across the plain. The fight against Kaguya took 6 minutes. The chronicles of every survivor agree on the length. They agree on the structure. Father and son fighting as one unit. Naruto opening dimensions, Minato closing them. Naruto's Djinn combinations cycling through every layer he had developed in private. Velafor on Kaguya's portals as she opened them, stagnation seizing them shut before she could finish. Furfur on her chakra fields, eating the constructions as she made them. Zepar's sound at the frequency of her form, disrupting her hold on her own body. Minato Hiraishin, flickering across the field, placing kunai with markers on every angle she might shift to, controlling the space. She fought. She fought like a goddess who had been asleep for 10,000 years and had only just learned she was lesser than what she had birthed. She opened a dimension to the dimension of acid. She opened a dimension to the dimension of ice. She opened a dimension to the dimension of bone. Each one, Furfur ate. Each one, Velafor froze. Each one, Naruto closed with a flick of Hokalor's wind through the seam. The strike that ended her was a combined one. Naruto pulled Kurama's full chakra into a single Bijudama in his right palm. He layered Bao's Bararok through the bomb. He layered Crochel's fire over it. He layered Amon's golden flame across the surface. He held the assembled weapon in his hand for 1 second, long enough for Minato to flicker behind Kaguya and lay a marker on her back. And then Minato flickered the weapon directly behind her in a Hiraishin throw, and the weapon detonated against her spine at point-blank range. She had no counter. The combined output was outside her experience. She had never encountered the Rook paired with Biju Chakra paired with Djinn Force in her 10,000 years of existence. The detonation consumed her form. The Allied forces, 2 kilometers back, watched a column of golden red and blue and white light rise from the plane to the height of the atmosphere, and the column hung there for 30 seconds, and the column dispersed. And when it dispersed, Kaguya was gone. The Ten-Tails' body was gone. The tailed beasts that had been inside it, all 8 of them, plus Kurama, who was still with Naruto, were freed across the field, and each one shook itself off and looked around and looked at the boy who had freed them, and inclined its head in the direction of the boy who had freed them, and walked off into whatever stretch of land the world had remaining for it. Naruto let the full 7 Djinn Equip recede. The Kurama cloak dimmed to a warm gold undertone across his skin. He stood in the broken plain with his sword in his hand and his father at his side, and the allied forces 2 kilometers back began to walk forward. He spoke loud enough for the plain to hear him. The age of fear is over. What comes next belongs to us. He said it once. He said it no second time. He did not need to. The allied forces, walking forward across the broken plain, picked it up between them and carried it forward. Minato's reanimation began to fail an hour later. He had been awake in his own body for 3 hours by then. The Edo Tensei binding had broken cleanly when Itachi ended Kabuto, but the structure of the technique itself was still present in Minato's body, and the structure required an active will to maintain it. Kabuto's will was gone. The technique was dispersing. Father and son sat together on a low rise at the edge of the plain. The plain stretched out below them. The allied forces were beginning the work of clearing the field, gathering the wounded, identifying the dead, sorting the reanimated shinobi who had been freed by Zephyr earlier in the day, and were now sitting in groups waiting to be allowed to return to their graves. Minato sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands folded between them. Naruto sat beside him in the same posture without noticing he had mirrored it. Naruto, Dad, your mother. I met her in the seal a year ago. I thought she might be in there. She is. She put a piece of herself in the seal before she died. She has been with me. I wanted you to know. What did she say to you? She told me about the night I was born. She told me about your conversation about my name. She told me you had picked it from one of Jiraiya's books because the character was a boy who refused to give up on the world. She wanted to know if I had refused. I told her I had. Minato laughed. It was a wet laugh. He covered his face with his hands for a moment. Naruto, she would be so proud of you. She is. She told me. I needed to hear it. Now I have. Naruto, I want you to know I picked you for the seal. I picked you because Dad, I know. Mom told me. You said you believed in my soul more than you believed in any seal. I know. You can stop. The choice was the right one. Minato cried. He cried with his hands over his face. He cried like a man who had been carrying something for 12 years and had just been told he could set it down. When he was done, he wiped his face. He looked at his son. Tell me about the Djinn, Naruto told him. He went through each of the 7 in order. He described each dungeon. He described the day he met Baal in the Chamber of Blue Stone. He described the volcano on the Green Island. He described the Yambala Canyons. He described the year of training in Magoi Negation. He described the man he had bought his second set of robes from in a port city in the south, and the wife of that man, and the man's grandson. He told his father his whole life from age 10 to 16 in 22 minutes. Minato listened with the focus of a man who had been sealed in an envelope for 16 years and had just been handed a stack of letters and was reading them one after the other. When he was done, Minato put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. I will be gone in a few minutes. I know, Dad. I want to tell you something specific about your mother. She used to hum when she cooked. The tune was off. It was the same wrong tune every time. She had been humming it since she was a girl in Uzushio. I never told her it was wrong. It was the way I knew it was her in the kitchen. I want you to know that. I want you to know your mother had a wrong tune that she hummed. Thank you, Dad. I will remember. Naruto. Yes. You will build something great. I will, Dad. I have started. I know. He smiled. He squeezed Naruto's shoulder once. The reanimation began to fade from his face. The color went first, then the solidity. His hand on Naruto's shoulder became light. Naruto did not move. He let his father's hand rest there until there was nothing left to rest. Minato was gone. The warm quality remained for a moment longer in the air. Then the air was its own air again. Naruto sat on the rise alone for another hour. B and Kakashi found him there at dusk. They sat with him without speaking. The three of them watched the sun go down over the broken plain together. When the sun had gone down all the way, Naruto stood up. He sheathed his sword. He inclined his head to his father's last place on the rise. He walked back toward the allied forces with B on his right and Kakashi on his left, and they walked into the camp together. The war was over. The peace that followed was the longest peace the elemental nations had seen in 300 years. The diplomatic work took months. The 5 Kaj summit reconvened in the Land of Iron 3 weeks after the field was cleared. The allied shinobi forces were formally restructured into a permanent body called the Joint Defense of the 5 Villages, with rotational command among the Kage and a permanent seat for the kingdom. Naruto's network of trading partners, which had been integrated with allied intelligence for the duration of the war, was formalized into an alliance called the Sea Road Pact. The pact had 9 founding member states by the time the snow melted in the Land of Iron, and 12 by the time the cherry blossoms came back to Konoha, and 17 by the time Naruto turned 17 in early autumn. He named the kingdom not for his power, and never for the seas he had sailed to find his Djinn, and never for the dragons that lived in his sword. He named it for a thing his mother had said to him in the mindscape, in passing, between sentences. She had been describing the Uzushiogakure of her girlhood, the village where she had been born, before its destruction, before her exile. And she had said it had been a place where the children played in the streets without anyone watching them with fear. Naruto had heard the phrase and had set it aside in his head, and when the time came to name the kingdom he was building, he came back to it. He called the kingdom Sora, sky. He called it after the open space children play under when no one is watching them with fear. The flag he raised over its capital was a sky blue field with a single white bird at its center. The bird was the rook. The rook, Tsunade pointed out one afternoon in his office, looked more like a chicken than a bird of fate. He told her this was excellent, and instructed his ambassadors to start describing it as a chicken in their formal communications, and the diplomatic corps of 3 nations spent 6 months trying to understand whether this was a joke. The capital was a new city, built on the coast of the Land of Tea, on the beach where he had told Temari he wanted to take her. The construction was begun in his 17th winter and finished in his 19th summer. The crews were drawn from Wave and from the Land of Hot Water and from 3 of the freed slave cities of the South. The architects were drawn from every nation. The first hospital was staffed by Tsunade's apprentices and chaired by Haku. Hinata Hyuga moved to the capital in the spring of Naruto's 18th year. She moved with 2 suitcases and the cloth bundle she had used to bring him dinner on a rooftop years ago, which she had kept folded in a drawer in her room, and which she now folded into the top of one of the suitcases. Her father stood at the gate of the Hyuga compound the morning she left and watched her walk down the steps with her bags in her hands. He let her go. He had not been the same man for some time. The moment when she had turned at the gate and looked back at him, he had inclined his head, a courtier's nod, the same kind he had received from a boy on a stone floor in an arena years ago. And she had inclined her head back, and they had said more in those 2 small gestures than they had said in 18 years. She found Naruto in a courtyard of the new palace at the center of the capital. He was sitting on a low stone bench under a young plum tree. He had been waiting for her since the morning. She set down her suitcases. She walked over to him. He stood up. He had been planning to stand up the moment she came through the gate, and the planning had been long, but the standing happened because his body insisted on it. Hinata. Naruto. He took her hands. He took them the way he had taken Temari's once, palms up, with the unhurried attention of a man who had been thinking about this moment for a long time. Hinata, I'm going to say something. I would like you to listen to it. I would like to know what you think of it after I have said it. Yes. You came up a ladder once with a cloth bundle. I have been thinking about that ladder for 4 years. I have been thinking about you for longer. You are the steadiest thing I know, and you are the kindest, and you are the bravest, because everything you have done in your life has been done while you were frightened, and a person who does things while frightened is more brave than a person who does things without fear. I would like to spend my life close to you. I am asking you now, in a courtyard of a city I built, partly because I wanted somewhere worthy to ask you, if you will agree to that. I am not asking you to marry me yet. I am asking you to come to the place where the marriage will eventually happen, if you find that the rest of the way feels right to you. I am asking for a yes to the first step. The yes to the second step can come later. Hinata looked at him. Her eyes were already wet. She did not faint. The fainting was years behind her. She had been training for this conversation since she was 12. Yes. Thank you. Yes to all of it, Naruto. Then we will take it in the order it comes. He took her face in both his hands. He kissed her on the forehead first, the way he had kissed her knuckles in an academy classroom. Then he kissed her on the mouth. The plum tree above them had begun to bloom that morning. The first plum tree of the spring in the city, and the petals came down on them in slow drifts, and Hinata Hyuga, who had been planning her courage for that kiss since she was 10 years old, needed none of the planning. She simply held him back. Tamari was at the formal dinner that night. She had been at the formal dinner because she was the Sora ambassador from the Sand, a position Gaara had appointed her to 2 years ago, with no expectation that she would object, and which she had not objected to. She had been close to Naruto for years, in the way she had decided she would be on the balcony in Konoha, present in the conversations, present in the room, near. She and Hinata had met formally 3 times before. They had decided, with the particular conviction that women who care about the same difficult man often arrive at, that there was no reason they could not also care about each other. Tamari raised her glass at the dinner. She gave a short toast. She said she had been planning to spend the next decade arguing with Hinata about who got more time with him, and she had instead decided to spend the next decade sharing him without arguing, because arguing was tiring and the man was easier to keep than to fight over. Hinata laughed for 2 full minutes. The Hokage's table, which had been listening, laughed with her. Naruto, at the head of the table, raised his glass to both of them and refused to pretend that anything he had built was a thing he had built alone. The Akatsuki was disbanded by then. Itachi had spent the year after the war in a small village in the Land of Fire, working with his brother under Tsunade's supervision in a process that involved more talking than fighting, and which had returned Sasuke to himself in stages. Sasuke had moved to Sora the same spring Hinata did, and he had been appointed to a position on Naruto's general staff, and he had accepted the position with the dry seriousness he brought to everything. Itachi had stayed in the Land of Fire. He had a cottage outside the village now, and he was painting. The paintings were good. Naruto had purchased the first 3 and hung them in his office. Zabuza Momochi had taken the position of head of the Sora Coast Guard. Haku ran the medical school. Kisame, the missing nin Naruto had spared, had returned to Kirigakure on the recommendation letter. Naruto had written and was now an officer in Meiterumi's reformed Mist, and he wrote letters every month to a man in Sora that no one was allowed to read. Konan ran the Sora intelligence service. She had taken Nagato's body home to Amagakure and buried it next to Yaiko's, and she had then come back to Sora and had stayed. Killer Bee visited 4 times a year. The visits were loud. Gaara was the Kazekage. He slept through the night, every night, for the rest of his life. Tsunade was the Hokage of Konoha for 8 more years before she handed the hat to Kakashi, who handed it to a young woman named Hanabi Hyuga, Hinata's sister, 15 years later. Konoha became, in those decades, one of the great cities of the New World. Its hospital was the best in the elemental nations. Its school was the second best after Sora's. Its gates remained open. The world the children grew up in was not the world Naruto had grown up in. The villages still had shinobi. The world still had conflicts. The treaty refused to abolish violence. It abolished the specific kind of violence that came from villages raising their children to be weapons. Across the 17 member states of the Sea Road Pact and the 5 villages of the Joint Defense, no Jinchuriki was ever sealed without the consent of the beast and the vessel both. No clan was ever permitted to put a curse seal on its members. No orphanage was ever permitted to operate without a Sora inspector on its rolls. It was an unfinished world. Naruto had said it would never be finished. But it was a different world from the one his mother had spent 16 years praying for him to survive. And the children playing in the streets of Sora's capital in the years that followed did so without anyone watching them, which had been the goal from the start. Years later, when Naruto Uzumaki was 34 and Hinata was 33, and they had 2 children, a daughter who looked like her mother and had her father's eyes, and a son who looked like his father and had his mother's eyes. Naruto walked out onto the eastern balcony of the palace at dawn. The balcony faced the sea. The sea, that morning, was the color of his daughter's eyes, the color of the sky over Tanzaku on the night he had left it for the last time with his mother's name in his chest. And the Ruksh pulling east, he stood at the rail. He had come out alone. Hinata was still asleep in the room behind him. The children were still asleep. The house was quiet. The Rook moved across the rail in front of him in a slow drift. It had been pulling east for the last week. He had felt it. It had failed to pull like this in many years. There was a thing across the sea, an island perhaps, or a continent he had yet to visit, or a structure rising out of the ocean the way the gold tower had risen out of the Land of Fire wasteland a quarter century ago. And the Rook was telling him about it in the small, slow way the Rook communicated when something large was waiting. He smiled. He went back into the room. He kissed Hinata on her forehead while she was still sleeping. He kissed his daughter on hers. He kissed his son. He came back out onto the balcony. He stood at the rail. He looked east. The sun came up over the water. The road went on. The world he had remade was behind him, sleeping, safe, and the world he had not yet remade was in front of him, waking, patient, full of every door he had yet to walk through. He inclined his head, the courtier's nod, the one he had given his mother and his father, and Hiyashihyuga and Tamari and Gara, and the village that had once crossed the street when he walked toward it. And he smiled the warm smile he had been wearing since he was 12 and had walked into a classroom in pale gold silk to give a verdict back to a room that had given him one. All right, he said, to no one, to everyone, to the sea. Let's go see.
Thanks for watching this insane full movie edit. Naruto with Sinbad powers is straight fire. If you got hyped, smash that like, subscribe for more wild what-if breakdowns, and drop which part fucked you up most in the comments. More bangers coming. Stay legendary.